Deloitte is committed to making an impact that matters for our clients, our people, and our communities. We are focused on honoring that promise through diversity, equity, and inclusion efforts to enact greater change at a faster pace. Because our greatest strength is, and always will be, our people. Change isn't just coming, it's here.
Hello, hello, everyone. Welcome to the Trailblazing Women Summit. We're so excited to see all of you today and for all of you online joining us. We've got a great program today, and we're very excited to be hosting this event both online as well as in person. But before we get started, I just want to take a moment. I think many of us have heard about the events over the weekend impacting our Black and Asian communities in both New York and in Dallas, or Buffalo and in Dallas. And so I just want to take a moment of silence, if you can join me. Thank you. I think it's important for us to take a moment, especially at an event like this. We're really thinking about not just gender equality, but the intersectionality we all live in. And make sure that we're just taking time to acknowledge what's going on in society. We all know what happens in our four walls, virtual walls of our companies, but we're all impacted. And it's important to take those moments to ourselves, focus on our mental health, and really take that time to support each other. And so in many ways, I'm glad we're gathered here today. We can take these moments and really just make sure we're continuing to create that community and making sure that we don't forget to acknowledge these things, that we don't become numb, and that we continue to support each other. To move on to the program for today, again, these themes will continue. We're very excited to have everyone here today. At Salesforce, we've been talking a lot about this notion of intersectionality, this is really work that we need to think about for all women. How do we continue to support each other? How do we think about those combination of experiences? We are not one monolith as women. And so how do we get really intentional about how we think about this work and how we support each other? One of the things we've been doing is not only just what are our experiences internally, but how do we think about the external environment, the internal environment? How do we understand the data and what it's telling us about the experiences of women in the workplace? Excuse me. And one of the things we've been focusing on is the experience of Black women in our organization. I think many of us have seen, especially across tech, there's a disparity in experience. We can't just as a company think about hiring. We have to think about hiring plus experience when people arrive within our respective organizations. And so these are the different ways that we can move the conversation forward, that we take it from those who have come before us and have been having these conversations. How do we up-level them? How do we make sure that we are the most inclusive and that we are understanding that everybody has those different and unique experiences and that we all bring those into the workplace? And so today we'll be exploring some of those themes. You'll see great representation across all of our panels, and we hope that you enjoy what we have to offer you today. So thank you all for coming, and thank you all online for tuning in, and we're ready to go with our first panel.
Good morning. Thank you, Lori, for the warm welcome and for kicking us off. And thank you, everyone, for spending your time with us today. I'm so excited to be here and honored to be your MC. We have a great panel of four speakers today. First, we have a session on She Sessions, the pandemic's impact on gender equality. Secondly, Closing the Deal, Women in Sales, Wellness as a Priority. I'll be listening closely to that one. Using your platform for change. And we'll close out the summit with our keynote speaker, a trailblazer, a true trailblazer woman, Michelle Zahner. So without further ado, I'd like to introduce our first session panel, She Session, the pandemic's impact on gender equality. As the lines between work and home have blurred over the past few years, our approach to how we're spending our time in both areas has changed dramatically. We will hear from experts on what the future of work looks like, discuss the opportunities companies have to accelerate gender equality, and how companies can recruit and retain top talent. Please welcome our moderator, Lori Castillo. Guests, Maria Colacarcio, CEO of Syndio. Tara M. Sinclair, economist and senior fellow of Indeed Hiring Lab. Dunya Sinawi, national digital offering leader of Deloitte.
Thank you so much for coming. I'm really excited to host this panel. I know you have so much to offer. We had such a good time in our pre-panel just talking about what's to come. So maybe we'll just start. I think everybody saw the pictures and the intros, but maybe just to hear from each of you, maybe Maria to start, just a quick intro and maybe something you'd highlight from the pandemic to start.
Of course. So thank you so much for having me today. It's such a pleasure to be here just in this room with so many inspiring women, and I feel lucky to be here, so thanks for having me. So my name's Maria Colacarcio. I'm the CEO of Syndio. We're a workplace equity analytics platform, and we help companies use technology to analyze and resolve pay gaps that are because of something like gender, race, and ethnicity. And I think one of the things that's really top of mind for me right now is looking at how the pandemic has set us back against our already glacial pace in progress against closing that gap. And it doesn't need to be that way. Solutions exist already today that can help us make that progress, but I think the question is, and one of the things that we're addressing today and why we're all here, is how do we move from standing around having conversations and admiring the problem, talking about the problem, to action? Because at this course in this course in speed, it will take us another 250, tack on another couple of decades to solve that gap, and that's just for white women. Add on another couple of decades when you're looking at women of color. So I think that's what we need to focus on is what are the action and the steps we can take to make progress against the pace.
Great. Tara?
Hi, I'm Tara Sinclair. I'm an economist with Indeed, their hiring lab team. I'm also an economics professor at George Washington University in Washington, D.C. And as an economist, one of the things that I have heard said more often than ever before is the word unprecedented. If we think about all of the experiences that we've had that have been so new and so different throughout the pandemic. And I think it's really important to keep that in mind as we're going forward and coming out of the pandemic and seeing what the new world is going to look like, is can we make these unprecedented events create an unprecedented world that is better for everyone? And I really think that that's what we want to focus on as we're going forward.
Great. Dunya?
So wonderful to be here. My name is Dunya Sinawi, and I lead the digital customer practice at Deloitte Digital, which is a team of 3,300 awesome storytellers and creatives and strategists and architects and engineers that help companies transform their sales, service, and marketing experiences, many of those experiences with Salesforce at the center. As I reflect on the pandemic, and I'll take a little bit more of a personal view, one of the lessons that I learned as I look back at my life pre-pandemic is that I was just rushing from one thing to another. Yeah. And so one of the things that's important to me now is just to be present. And like many people, I've lost loved ones during the pandemic, and not being able to be there for them during lockdown was really hard. And so I just remember every day to be present, enjoying the moment, whether it's breakfast with my son, my morning run, joy with colleagues. So it's wonderful to be here with all of you.
Fantastic. Well, Tara, maybe we'll start with you. This great negotiation, as we're calling it at this point. The last few years have certainly shaken up the workplace, maybe to the tune of about 47 million Americans who quit their job last year. And so I think it's sort of interesting as employers, we're in this different space where we're talking about salaries differently. How do you think employers should be thinking about conversation? What would you share with us from that perspective?
So first of all, I really appreciate that you're using the term great renegotiation. And we've often heard in the press, great resignation. But this isn't a time when people are just quitting their jobs and not working, right? This is about an opportunity to try and make your work better. And that's really what we're seeing that people are doing. And I think that's really something that employers need to keep in mind, because the balance of power has massively shifted when we're talking about the labor market. Now employers are having to really think about, how can I make my job appealing to a potential candidate, not tell me why you want to work here. Right? The world is very different, and so we really want to think about that. And so, obviously, a lot of time it's about show me the money, and we don't want to in any way step back from that. That is a very important piece of the puzzle. But there is a lot of employers, particularly think about small businesses, where they say, I can't do more money. What can I do? And then there's all sorts of other ways that we can think about making both the workplace more appealing, as well as growing the pool of potential candidates. And I really think this is an important piece. If we think about some male-dominated industries where maybe we're like, oh, this is what this type of worker looks like. Well, maybe we could expand that quite a bit and look at a much broader pool. And maybe also we could offer the kinds of benefits that make it easier for women to enter these sorts of workplaces that maybe previously didn't feel so comfortable and welcoming. And so that's really, I think what we're thinking about now is, how do we really take this bargaining power that we now have as workers and make it into the best workplace for workers. And I think there is a payoff there for firms as well, because if you have happy workers, they're going to be more productive, more loyal, and those are going to accrue in terms of benefits to the employers as well, and therefore we can grow the entire economy with this sort of inclusive perspective.
Yeah, no, that's fabulous. And, you mentioned this, one of the important aspects of that is pay. And so we're so fortunate here to have Maria, one of our partners, as the CEO of Syndio, really focused on closing that gender pay gap. Maybe, Maria, if you can tell us, why is it so crucial for companies to do that? I know we've been longtime partners, but there are still companies out there that aren't thinking about this. What would you share about, why this is so important for us to focus on?
Yeah, thank you. And it's important that companies start looking at this more broadly, because this isn't just about gender. This is about gender, race, ethnicity. This is about looking at, how do you value your people for who they are and the contributions they bring. And so any company that starts with DEI is really missing the foundational elements. To be a diverse, equitable, and inclusive workplace, you first have to ensure that you're not disproportionately paying people or giving people opportunities in a way that is inequitable. So looking at pay, making sure you don't have disparities because of gender, race, ethnicity, or other things. Looking at how you offer opportunities to people. How are they moving? How are they getting promoted? And this is something that, through our partnership with Salesforce, it's been fascinating to watch, because the company has embedded workplace equity at its core. This is something that is at the core tenet in terms of being a great company, providing long-term value to not only their people, but also to shareholders. And that's why this is so critical. You can't outsource something that is so important to the success of your business and to how your people feel, whether they feel valued or not. You've got to really take it in. You've got to bring it in-house. You've got to make it a core business and leadership imperative. This has to be something that leaders are looking at. And that's why it's been such a great partnership, because at this company in particular, this is a top-down initiative. It has the support of the board. It has the support of leadership. And that's where, to answer your question directly, a lot of companies go wrong when they're looking at this as a women's issue. Right. They're looking at this just in rooms like this, in rooms where women are gathered to talk about problems. This has to be a leadership issue. This is not a women's issue. This is not an issue that should just be looked at through those perspectives. It's got to be looked at the board level, at the CEO level, at the leadership level.
Yeah, such an important part, and I know been such a valuable part of our culture and something we continue to reevaluate. You talked about the notion of its gender and race, and I think that's been an important part of our evolution in this work as well, because, again, back to that intersectionality, we can't look at one without the other. It's really connected.
Absolutely. Thank you.
So, Dunya, maybe you can tell us a little bit about, this whole notion of flexible work. Mm-hmm. At Salesforce, we call it success from anywhere. But, the way we work, the way we collaborate, the way we get together is really evolved. Tell me some of your thoughts around the future of work and how women are impacted by this, both the positive and the negative, how you're seeing it.
So as companies have sort of reimagined work, hybrids become the norm, flexible arrangements are out there for people to take advantage of. It's really impacted women in a negative way where they feel increased burnout. We recently completed a survey of 5,000 women in 10 countries, and a third of the respondents cited that their ability to disconnect was poor or very poor. Almost half said that they felt that they had to be always on, and if they weren't, that it would impact their career advancement. More than half didn't even feel comfortable talking about the challenges that they were experiencing at work. So in order for hybrid, in order for flexible arrangements to really work in the future, we have to make sure that women have access and exposure to leaders and sponsors. We have to make sure that we train others to be inclusive, especially in a hybrid environment, on how to actually engage people when on Zoom and virtually. We have to make sure that those that are taking advantage of flexible arrangements do have career progression, and others see that they can progress their careers that way. And I think when you have an environment where there's trust, when there is respect for boundaries, then we can make sort of that future of work possible. Women can have an impact both at home and at work and really feel happy and fulfilled. And the possibilities at that point are limitless.
Oh, that's great. Such a really great point. So, I think this time is also called for a difference in leadership and how we think about leadership. This is a question that I'd like to pose to all of you, but maybe to start with you, Tara. As leaders during these unprecedented times, I keep using that word, but it just keeps seeming relevant. Mm-hmm. How have you found yourselves making changes in your leadership and your approach, and how do you think the pandemic has influenced your leadership style?
Oh, that's a really interesting question, and I think that that's something that I appreciate that people have taken the time to evaluate that and to think about it. I think sometimes when we take a new framework in which we're interacting with our teams is really a time when we start to say, oh, maybe I should think about my leadership style in this way, where maybe we should have been evaluating it all along, but it takes these sorts of large changes to make us really reevaluate. And I think one thing that I've seen both within teams that I've worked with at Indeed, but also in conversations with students and alumni, all those different places, is really connecting more as humans. And really, because I think when we see the little boxes, you might be tempted to treat everybody like they're a little box. But instead, something that I've seen over and over again, and something that I've definitely invested in myself, is actually trying to find the person in the box and really connect and have those initial few moment conversations before we get into the meat of the work, to recognize that we're working with whole people here. And I think that particularly matters, again, coming back to the economics of things, where we are talking about workers are people, not just cogs in a machine. And if we're going to make a welcoming, inclusive workforce, we need to get to know the people on the team to find out what inspires them, what motivates them, in order to bring more joy to the workplace, and therefore also to bring more productivity and output out of it too.
Absolutely.
It's a win-win.
Yeah, no, that's great. Donya, how about for you?
So interestingly, for years when I would get my 360 feedback, I was described as a leader that displayed a lot of empathy. But during the pandemic, I think it was one of the things that became my superpower. I always cared about and prioritized personal connections, calls, text, emails, but then to figure out during the pandemic how to do it at scale, because people were at home and feeling lonely and feeling isolated. And so all of those personal connections and touch points that you described increased, but also figured out how to do it on our collaboration site with all 3,000 plus team members in a way that people felt really comfortable to share their personal stories, to talk about successes and setbacks, encourage my leadership team to also do the same thing. And I've always felt that gratitude, kindness, positivity were really contagious. And I think it's really important to take time and recognize what people are doing, their milestones, their impact, big or small. It's important for them. It's important for us as individuals, and it's important for the company. So.
Yeah, for sure. And maybe, Maria, you can give us the perspective both as a CEO of a company and as a direct manager, because in your position, you have to also think about both. You know, how do you think about rallying the employees of your company during these times as well?
Yeah, it's been interesting. And I think for us, we're a growth stage tech company with about 140 employees. And what's really come to the forefront, and I think companies of all sizes are seeing this, is transparency. And so one of our values at Syndio, we call it the candor trust loop. And it's about being candid and direct with your colleagues in order to create that cycle of trust. Because when you're candid and you say something that may actually introduce a little bit of vulnerability to both of your points, you incur trust. People trust you more. So how do we as leaders have that level of transparency through good times and bad? And it's the bad that gets really tricky, because you want to be candid with your people. You want to be honest and vulnerable and transparent. But how do you do that when you're facing, let's say, an announcement on your median pay gap that may not be perfect? It may not be exactly what you want. And this is what companies are going to start facing. There's a bill right now, actually a California median pay gap disclosure bill, that would require all companies with over 100 people to disclose their median pay gap. And the thing about the median pay gap is it's not about pay. It's about opportunity. It's about where are people situated. Are they up here making the big dollars, or are they down here in the entry-level roles? And most companies have a gap of some sort. And so how do you go to your people if you haven't been transparent and candid before, when there isn't that buildup of trust to say, we've got a gap, but here's how we're going to address it. Here's how we're going to take concrete steps to solve it. So I think for me, leading a company and knowing sort of what's coming, it's been this challenge of how do you get really transparent and candid with your people, and how do you give them the freedom and flexibility to do the same with each other?
Yeah, and I think the other piece is with you, right? It's that trusted relationship that goes in both directions, because sometimes if you don't know, you can't fix it. And so even just opening that dialogue, that vulnerability, that empathy, it creates that opportunity to also hear things you might not usually hear, which I think is really important in that sort of bi-directional conversation. I think that's how we get to those things that really start to make a difference, and really start to come to the places where we're really supporting our employees in the way they need to be supported versus what we think maybe might be best sometimes too.
Absolutely. I mean, and Salesforce has been on the forefront of this for a long time, having those tough conversations about here's where we're at, but here's how we're going to make it better.
Exactly. All right. So, Tara, this one's for you. So, as senior fellow at Indeed Hiring Lab, it's interesting because you develop original research on this topic as well, around jobs, around labor. What are 2 or 3 things that the research is telling us?
Sure. So the first thing I will point back to is that when we started working at the Indeed Hiring Lab like 8 years ago, we started doing research on the labor market. And one of our early themes was about flexibility in the workforce and how much that was desired by workers. And it's really been amazing to see the ramp up in the advertisement of flexible and in particular remote work, obviously at first in response to the pandemic. But one of the really neat things that we see in the data is that it ramped up as the pandemic ramped up, but then it persisted. And so even as various restrictions are loosening, the advertisement of more remote work is persisting in the job postings. And so that's really exciting to me, because I think that this means that that employers have learned that this works for them. And then the key question is this going to work for the workers? And as long as we continue to see this stronger bargaining power, where right now we are seeing that we've got about 2 jobs openings for every unemployed worker right now. So that really does suggest we've got a fair bit of bargaining power. And so we can possibly make this type of remote work the type that works for workers, not just for the employers. So that's the first thing that we've really tracked in the data, is that this doesn't seem like it's one of those things that's going to fade away, but it's something that workers want. We've seen that for a long time, and now it's something that employers are realizing that it's something that they can offer and continue to advertise for future jobs, not just the ones temporarily today, but on into the future. Another thing that I'll highlight, and this has been my passion project for a number of years, is looking at the mismatch in the labor market and thinking about what do workers want versus what do employers say that they need? And how can we bring those two things closer together? And what I've actually found is that recently that has actually gotten better. Oftentimes people are saying, hey, it's so hard to find people to work for our roles that it must be that people just don't want to do these jobs. But instead, we are seeing that those different distributions are actually coming closer together, that people today are looking for the same types of things that are on offer. And so I really think that employers, when they're saying, hey, it's hard, it's because they're having to make concessions. But they are, and therefore that's drawing the workers in. And so that might feel challenging, especially, we had a very long time, basically most of the time period from 2008 to 2019, a lot of that was really an employer's bargaining world. And now seeing this shift happening and seeing that they're saying, oh, I'm having to make effort to make my workplace appealing to workers. And I can't just say well, hey, it's your job, do it. But instead, how can I make this job attractive to you? How can I make this work? How can we work around your daycare needs? How can we work around your needs for caring for elderly family, for balancing trade-off with your spouse, with your partner? All of those things, those conversations are now happening because workers are in the driver's seat. And I really just, the key theme I keep going after is let's keep it that way.
Well, one of those things, again, thinking about is attracting working moms. Dunya, we had a conversation before. You've been very proud and open about, being both a dynamic leader and a working mom. What's your advice to companies? How should we be thinking about that? And as a working mom yourself, what's your advice to the women out there as well?
I mean, when I think back to when I had my son 12 years ago and I was in financial services at the time, and when you would take maternity leave at that point was 12 weeks, there was a lot of chatter about, are you going to take your entire 12 weeks? And you felt like you needed to be engaged still all of the time, even though that you were out, especially so that you wouldn't miss out on opportunities, especially for upward advancement. And now the dialogue has changed so much. So we offer 16 weeks of mat leave and pat leave. The discussion is all about making sure that people take the entire 16 weeks off and can completely disconnect the entire time. So what a difference it is in policy and in the change of conversation. I think the other thing that's been wonderful is our CEO, our consulting CEO, Dan Helfrich, talks about the behaviors that are important for people to emulate. And he does them in everyday equations. And one of my favorites is that your well-being is greater than your organization's well-being. So I'm really unapologetic as a single mom about the days that I'm just not going to travel, about when I'm going to take off early because I myself want to pick up my son from school and see his face when he's running to the car. If I want to volunteer during the day, for, his golf lessons in the summer. And so I make the decisions around what's best for me and my son, and I'm a better mom for it and a better leader, and the company supports it in words and in actions. So
that's amazing. And I do think it is, to Tara's point, this is something that companies have to think about and consider. How do you build that flexibility into it? Maria, maybe this next question I'll turn to you, sort of continuing on this theme of wellness and burnout. I know in our Deloitte Women's Work Study released this year, women are more likely to be looking for a new role than they were a year ago. And burnout seems to be one of these top drivers, these top factors. I think we had the stat here of nearly 40% of women actively looking for a new employer are actually citing burnout as the reason. What do you think companies can do to ensure women employees are not getting burned out? What are those things that we can do to help prioritize mental health? Do some of the things Dunya was just talking about.
Yeah, great question. I think it was some sort of team survey or some kind of survey that came out recently that said, on average, people are working 26% more now that we've gone into this remote world. And if you think about it, that's a day a week. Yeah. So we really have to stop as leaders and say, holy cow, yes, my people want remote, they want flexibility, but there's also this complete obliteration of boundaries. Mm-hmm. We have no boundaries anymore. We are going from work to life to work to life. There's tons of interruption. And so I think one of the things you have to do is be really mindful that even if you have, so at Syndio, for example, we have an unlimited PTO policy, but when I really sat back and looked at the data, a lot of folks weren't taking it. And when they were taking it, they were still plugged in. they weren't actually feeling the ability to disconnect. So what did we do? We mandated 2 shutdowns a year. So between the July 4th holiday and between Christmas and New Year's, we're done. We're shut down. And I think things like that and thinking creatively about, okay, my people are in situations where they're experiencing burnout. They're working a ton more. We've made an offer. And someone could say, well, you offer unlimited PTO. If they're not going to take it, that's their problem. Like, you've put it out there for your people. So if they're not taking advantage of it, that's on them. But it's not. You're putting people in an environment, your people, your most valued asset, where they don't feel they have the luxury to turn off or disconnect, or they don't feel they can. Maybe it's because they're going to come back to a mountain of work, and that gives them anxiety. Maybe it's because, there could be a million reasons. So how do you take that next step and say, I tried this. I still see what my people are experiencing. What do you do next?
Yeah, no, I think that's a fabulous question. I think the notion of unlimited PTO, it's sort of a misnomer. It's fabulous, but we all have to do it. And I think it's the whole system has to allow that flexibility for it to actually happen, and in a meaningful way, to your point. Not that I'm not here in quotes, but are you really turned off and unplugged? Yeah. Tara, I would love to hear your views on this one as well.
Yeah, well, actually, this is something that I think Indeed has done really well within the company. Is that so we have U days. So once a month, the entire company globally takes a day off, and it's amazing because Slack is quiet. You go back and check on Monday, there's nothing from Friday. And that's actually something that Indeed has always done well in terms of work-life balance, is that even over the weekends, there is little to no communication on Slack or on email. People really do take those breaks, and I think that that's something really inspiring to me. I come from a world of academics where we don't ever take breaks. We're grading papers nights, weekends. That's just part of the job. And to see the value in terms of people coming back refreshed after a long weekend, it really did compel me to keep that in mind and really want to cultivate that and make sure that that is a continuing culture at Indeed, but also to take that with me to other places that I work and even with my own students, because that's definitely something, I've seen burnout with students. Coming back in person was very hard. All transitions are hard, even if they're to a better setup. The students wanted to come back in person, but it was hard. And the first semester, I actually did basically give them a U day in the middle of the semester and just said, this assignment, let's just not do that one, because you need to take some time and rest, and you're going to come back refreshed, and you're going to be able to do better through the rest of the semester. And the students really appreciated it.
That's amazing. Actually, it's a great example of the way allies and managers can actually help make this happen. Maybe, Dunya, you can tell us a little bit about how do allies support, both in all the conversations we're talking about, whether it's the pay piece or the wellness piece. What do you think the role allies play, and how do we best leverage their support?
Well, I love the differentiation between the term allies, because that's really somebody that is willing to use their own personal capital to advance others and to listen and to understand, which is so important. I'll tell you that my male colleagues at work during the pandemic experienced what it was like to be home, be with their children, be able to enjoy the everyday. And so it's pretty amazing to see them step up for the women in their lives at work and be allies. I know that my life, and Tara and I were talking about this earlier, has gotten really busy with travel over the course of the last 3 or 4 months. And everybody was getting together a week before last to do year-end reviews, and I just hadn't had a week at home. And it was my male colleagues that said, hey, Dee, you've got to take the time at home. We'll make sure that they're set up in their room, that you can totally engage, but respectfully, they said, you should sit this one out. So I did, and I happened to be talking to a wonderful woman on my team that happens to be in this room, and I was talking to her about the story, and so she talked to me about the joy of missing out, JOMO, as opposed to the fear of missing out.
Oh, I love it.
So now I talk about JOMO all the time when it comes to making hybrid work, having your allies stand up for you, and be able to make recommendations when they see that you need it, which I love.
Oh, that's amazing. What I'd like to maybe shift gears now is really lifting up the next generation. You know, we talked about we all have many different experiences. We're all many different ages and generations in the workplace. Maybe, Maria, you can tell us, why is it important to hold space for these types of conversations, to talk about our experiences and really share the learnings with the next generation of women and really support them as they're joining the workforce today?
I think it's important on so many levels, because what we're doing today and sharing this, not just with the people in this room, but the people watching that extend from this room and come from all walks of life, is that we're providing visibility to folks wanting to jump in and be accomplices. So when I think about the workplace equity piece, I think of accomplices. When I think of Stan Dunlap, who works at this company, he is not a bystander. He is in the fight with us. He is an absolute accomplice. And I think that's what it's about. It's about figuring out, how do we make this a leadership imperative? How do we make this something that goes from being, again, a passive conversation when we're all standing around sort of admiring the problem and talking about the problem and speaking to ourselves and each other where we're all violently agreeing, and expanding to, this is a company's accountability to its people.
Right.
This is not a woman's job to figure out how to better negotiate. This is a company's accountability to ensure that they are paying fairly and equitably across their people. This should not be on a Black woman to ensure that she's getting fair opportunities for promotion and advancement. That's on the company. That's on leaders. So I think that's why these conversations are so important, but even more so, extending these conversations beyond this room to get those accomplices in the ring with us so that we can really, really send this up to leadership and companies.
Oh, it's a really, really, really great point. And I can't believe it. We're already down to our last few minutes here together. So maybe what we'll do is just go down the line, starting with you, Dunya. What is your parting advice, maybe both to employers, women in the room? What's your parting advice and how to think about this and kind of just take what's happened over the pandemic and, decide where to go next and how to think about the world?
I think the first is, be transparent, share what's working, share what isn't, share your plan. Second is that, women's well-being improves and they feel more satisfaction when they can answer yes to 3 questions. One is that they feel that they can report when there is behavior that isn't inclusive without any fear that it will impact their career. 2, that they feel that they can make work and other commitments outside work for them. And then 3, that their career will move at the pace that works for them. And so, if I was an employer, work for or think about the initiatives that will have women answer yes to those 3 questions.
Oh, that's fabulous. Tara, how about from you?
Yeah, I think that the big theme, and I've kind of already been highlighting this throughout, is get to know your workers and let your boss get to know you, because this isn't just about, I like these things, I don't like those things. This is how to make our relationship better, healthier, more productive. And so it really can be a win-win situation. We don't have to have these negotiations where it's like, okay, I'm taking more, you're getting less. We can actually find ways to collaborate and be more productive and really grow our opportunities in our business. And that takes communication even about these issues that you might think of as being relatively personal. But if it's going to make you better at work and happier outside of work as well, that's something that hopefully both parties are asking for and sharing.
Oh, that's fantastic. And maybe Maria, to wrap us up.
I think just from the standpoint of where we are in this moment, we are in a period of extreme economic volatility, particularly in tech, particularly if you're looking at the NASDAQ day to day, which I wouldn't recommend.
No.
But if you are a leader and you are experiencing this moment of great volatility, maybe even crisis, maybe even, dare I say it, recession, you have to think about, what do I want to be and what is the legacy that I want to leave in a time of crisis? when facing crisis in my company, do I want workplace equity? Do I want how I value my people to take a back seat? Is that how I want to be remembered? Or do I want to take this opportunity to ensure that in good times, in bad and volatile times, in times where things might be uncertain, I continue to put my people first. I continue to make sure through empathy, transparency, everything that we've talked about, that my people trusted me and knew I was making not only the best decisions for the business, but the best decisions to make sure I held on to that trust when we came out the other side.
Oh, that's fabulous. I mean, from an inclusive and safe environment to building that trusted relationship to who do you want to be when this is over, and how do you really ensure that you have that trust and transparency in the end? Such important lessons for all of us to take. Really appreciate all three of you for spending time with me, spending time with all of us, and I hope you all take those learnings from today. Thank you all. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much for the insights on the pandemic's impact on women. Next, I'd like to introduce our second panel, Closing the Deal, Women in Sales. Top executives will share how to build and sustain a successful sales career. Please welcome to the stage our moderator, Denise Dresser, EVP and Global CRO, Comms, Media, and Tech of Salesforce, Trailblazing Saleswoman Kim Smith, VP US West Region Technology Sales of IBM, Hillary Headley, Head of Global Sales Operations and Enablement of Zoom, LaShonda Anderson-Williams, EVP and CRO for Healthcare and Life Sciences at Salesforce.
Hello.
Hi.
Hello.
Hello. Hello.
Hello.
All right. All right. We are ready.
We're here.
We are here. Yes. We're gonna have some good conversation here.
Yes,
Is everybody excited?
Yes.
All right. All right. All right. I love my panel. Let's get going. Okay. So we're gonna start out easy, but all of you have to answer this one. Okay. Easy one. First of all, if you could just share how you got into sales or what your path was, just how did you end up where you are? You don't have to give your whole career, but just what sparked your interest? I'm looking at you, LaShonda, so I'm just going to pick you.
I'm feeling the energy.
Yeah.
So, one, thank you all for participating. I think some of you have heard the story. I didn't know I wanted to get into sales because I didn't know it as sales. I thought sales was a used car salesman. That was my experience. I wanted to be a nurse. And I wanted to be a nurse for two specific reasons. One, I always thought I had positive energy drawn to me in helping people. I got a lot of gratitude around seeing people accomplish their goals and playing a role. I didn't have to finish it, but I wanted to be a part of the journey. Mm-hmm. And then the second thing is I saw that they were offering $5,000 sign-on bonuses for nurses back in the day. So when I put it two and two together and realized I could help people and get paid, that's a combination. And
Smart.
I've gotten wiser. It's not about just the money, but the idea of helping people accomplish something and having just like a piece of the connective tissue that creates something bigger than me is really, really impactful.
Mm-hmm. So great.
Yeah,
Hillary.
I can go next.
Yeah.
Sure. So I started as an intern at a radio station in Sioux Falls, South Dakota, because they needed someone to work and keep their data clean in their CRM. It wasn't Salesforce. It was ACT database. But what I realized was the sales floor was very fun, and it was just great to be a part of that energy and closing deals. And I didn't carry a quota at the time, and I don't today, but there was a great responsibility that I found in being able to help and be in that environment, and really respected what was being done so that I could have the internship and do what I needed to do. And that kind of kicked off the love of always being in sales and around sales and everything to do to support it.
Great, thank you. All right, Kim.
Yeah, I think Hillary and I are similar in this. I did an internship at the newspaper, and it was advertising sales, where I actually went door to door. And everyone that knows me know that I don't meet strangers. I love people. So I don't know that it was my necessarily intention to actually fall into sales. I thought I was going to actually be like marketing, creative design, et cetera. But I really found a love of actually helping people. You know, and at this point, obviously, you're selling ads. You're trying to help them sell. And I continued. 28 years later, I'm still here and very happy to help businesses, customers solve business problems. So
I think
there you go.
it's so interesting how there's sort of this reputation of sales, of what it is, and it's so far from that. When you hear each of those stories, I actually started out, I was an accountant. I never thought I would be in sales, but similar to what you said, LaShonda, I just really loved being part of teams and helping them achieve things that they never thought were possible, and just being like that one small sort of push to that, and then combining it with business acumen that would actually help people not just sell them something they didn't need, because that feels terrible. We've all been there. But selling something that actually will help them solve problems. And that's what I think sometimes misunderstood about sales and prevents people from getting into it. But we're getting ahead of ourselves. Okay, Kim, I'm going to start with you.
Okay.
All right, about representation. And so, not that there's a competition, but women are high performers in sales, okay? So again, not a competition. We want everyone to be successful, but there it is, okay? And if you're thinking, I have a whole bunch of reasons we should talk about why too. I have a bunch of theories, but that's not the question I have right now. Well, maybe it could be. What do you think? So we're thinking about the bottom line, right? Women are top performers, yet they're not represented in the field as much as their male counterparts. Why do you think that is?
Yeah, it's a great question. I think a couple things. One is lack of flexibility with the integration of work-life balance. You know, having that option to have adjustable schedules so that we can run our own lives and be a mom and be a wife, but also run a business. We need that. I think that's one thing that's key. I think we also need to look back under the covers. And when you look at the studies, it's showing that a lot of companies have, embraced women today. We're popular guys. They've embraced us, but when you pull it back, right, when you pull the covers back, 1 in 4 organizations really work on advancing women as a priority from a career perspective. That's hurtful for us. And then I still believe that there is the prevailing kind of energy around us, right, with stereotyping saying that women aren't capable of being leaders. We're viewed as being, very nice and strong, and we're nurturers, versus leaders are viewed as, they're very direct, they're strong, they're aggressive. Can we be both? And I think those are 3 things that are still stopping us from being great right now.
Yeah, I think it's something that we have to continue to strive for, and also reframe what the job itself is, and the flexibility that we actually do have. The flexibility that we do have in this role, which I think we'll come to in a minute. Hillary, I'm going to turn to you. So there's probably women online or even in the audience that are either getting started or just early in their journey in sales. Yes. Or maybe they've made the switch like you did. What's the one piece of advice that you either received or that you would give somebody who's just starting out in this field?
Yeah, absolutely. I can have some rough edges, and I know that. And the one piece of advice would be to know your brand and tell your story. Started asking some trusted colleagues, and there's some patterns that you can find. And I had to manage that because they would say 3 things typically. She's smart, she gets stuff done, and either she's great to work with or she's difficult to work with. And I had to manage that and kind of own that part of my story of why I could be difficult to work with. 1, operations can be stop signs. I get that. There's that part of the role. 2, I can ask a lot of questions. I can be very obstinate. I definitely have some of those rough edges. But I needed to manage that and get ahead of that so that my story could be told, and hopefully folks who supported me could help tell that story, because I frequently was the only woman in the room, or I was the only woman at the leadership table. And so I needed to protect myself and find those folks that could help understand my story and do some of that sponsorship. So know your reputation or know your brand, tell your story, and hopefully find those folks who can help you tell it as well.
I think that. Sorry, LaShonda, were you going to?
I love that. I think part of what you just described is important is to be self-aware and self-confident and understanding how you perceive yourself is not necessarily how you show up to others, and being reflective and accepting the feedback. And your comment around being rough around the edges, that's opportunity to break through on things. So it's about reflection, but self-awareness is really, really important for all of us.
I think that's such an interesting topic. I think it's relevant no matter what career, what role you're in. But I do think, particularly with sales or even in an extended function, it's all about partnership and collaboration. And the fun thing about it is that every day is different. You really don't know. I love it when my dad will ask me what I do, and I'm like, I just can't explain it. Do you guys, anybody have that problem? Raise your hand. You try to explain. I'm like, go to Salesforce.com. I help people use that. It's hard to explain. But I think being aware of intent versus impact is something I think we talk a lot about early in your career when you're getting to know or you're starting a new job, is just understanding the intent is often 95% of the time really well intended, but you're different, and that can have a bearing. It's great advice. Okay, LaShonda. Yes. So I'm going to talk to you about pressure, because it's not all fun and games. It's not always about helping people and it goes smoothly. It's difficult. So how do you think about, first of all, the pressures, right? The pressures that change day to day, week to week, month to month, quarter to quarter, year to year. How have you managed that, and what advice would you give to people thinking about a role in sales vis-a-vis, what they're going to experience and the pressure and demands?
Yeah, I would say the pressure exists in any job, any role we have today. If you're a nurse, I can't imagine the pressure, or a physician trying to save someone's life. So I think pressure is relative. And when you sign up to go into a role like sales, you're signing up for an opportunity to help. We talked about helping others be successful. But there are moments where we plan for the most perfect sales process, and no matter what you do, something happens through no fault of your own. And so, one, I think we have to give ourselves space and grace to acknowledge that we cannot perfect everything. No matter how hard we try, no matter how great we are, there is always something outside of our control. And I think my advice would be is understanding the ability to control what you can. The things you have the most control of, you should be aware of that and be able to action. The things you don't, you kind of have to let it go. And some of it is just being in the right time, in the right place, or having the right relationships. And so understanding that. The second thing I would say is, in terms of advice, is the sky is not going to fall. We put so much pressure on ourselves that if this deal doesn't happen or that relationship, sort of goes sideways, my career is over. It's not. How many deals you lose, how many deals you win. At the end of the day, no one's really counting. What counts is your ability to have an impact on others' lives. And in sales, that's helping our customers. In my world, helping people save lives. That is the most gratitude thing I can do, is if I can help my customers in this industry do a better job of understanding their patients, creating better medicine and outcome. That's the thing that impacts me. Is there pressure? Absolutely, every day. But I can't sort of ground myself in the things I can't control. I can ground my things in the thing I have control over. And I can ground myself in the fact that this too shall pass. Because as soon as you get that perfect deal, you actually got to go deliver it in our world in consumption. Yeah. You actually got to go do it.
And when it seems too perfect,
if it's too quiet,
I'm waiting for something to go wrong.
That's right. So if it's too quiet, that's when you should be concerned. If it's noisy, you got action in the system. Right. That's a great thing. But pressure is constant. But we don't control the things we don't. The things we do, we absolutely have an opportunity to make a difference in our lives, and likely in the lives of so many other people.
I think that's so well said. Did you want to add something to that?
No, I was just laughing. I thought it was hilarious what you said. It's just so true, because at the end of the day, you still got to then deliver it.
Yeah, exactly.
You got to deliver it.
It's true, because I think the question is meant to elicit. People have said to me, I'm sure they've said to each of you, I don't want to be in sales. I can't deal with the pressure, or I've got too many things going on. And I think the reality is to remember, first of all, I think pressure is a privilege. It means that you're working in a field that's relevant. You're doing something that's important, right? No matter what you do. When I have a bad day, I'll say to myself, maybe I should just do the other thing. Whatever the other thing is, I'm going to take as seriously as the job I take right now, really. And so it's not, I don't think it's any more pressure inducing in sales, but I think it has a reputation as such, and I think it's really no different than any other job. In some ways, the metrics are clear, right? Yes. The metrics are clear of what you need to do, and I think I appreciate that. Okay, Kim, I'm going to come back to you. Okay. So this is kind of an interesting question, because I think it's not necessarily specific to women in sales, but I'm going to ask it that way. I think we talked about pressure, quotas, there's travel, there's other things we're going to get into about a role in sales as females and the unique challenges. What are some of the obstacles, or an obstacle that maybe you encountered in your career being a female in sales or in a distribution function, and how did you overcome that, and what did you learn?
Yeah, so great question. I've been in sales for now 28 years. And I'm remembering when I was a first-line manager many, many blue moons ago. I'm not going to date myself here, but it was a while ago. And my first job, I managed 13 white males. My first manager's job. You can't make it up.
First of all, that's too many people to manage at once. I mean,
that's a different topic.
That's a different topic. That's a
not
different
talking
topic.
about span of control here.
Yeah.
But 13 white males, and I actually, I mean, now that we're more aware and we know terms, right? Now I know what I had. I ended up with what I call imposter syndrome, right? We go through this, where you're thinking all of a sudden that you can't do the job. I mean, it's so important to have representation, to see yourself and others in management positions. But when you can't see yourself and you have no one else to look at, and you're getting, you know, hard questions thrown at you. Remember, I'm a new manager, and I'm managing legacy senior men.
That's so hard.
And some of the questions I didn't have the answers for. So I literally had to work with myself. Some of this is mental. It's in your head. But I had to work with myself. I had to work with my mentors and my coaches. I can't tell you how valuable these people have been in my career. Because literally, at some point, I was doubting that I needed to, that I deserved to be here, that I could do the job, right? I did a lot of self-help, so that's what one thing that I read a lot of books. I had a lot of conversations with mentors and coaches. It got to a point where I had letters of affirmation all over my wall. I woke up, you're great, you're cute, you're pretty. I mean, you know, whatever it took. It was on the mirrors. It was on the back of the closets. Yeah. Whatever it took to just keep talking to myself. And here's what's really important. You also have to get some success and experience under your belt. Yeah. Once I got a couple of wins and some success, I was unstoppable. You don't even understand this. I sat at the table different. You know, I kind of sat up a little bit. I was feeling myself. You know, I walked in the room with confidence because I knew I could. But there was a moment that I doubted myself. So that's one of the things that I did. So you please elicit help from coaches, mentors. Go to the sessions like these because they can be so helpful. And I'll tell you another story. But anyway, that was one of the things that I think really charged me in the very beginning. And then as I matured in sales and got into different roles, and I'm going to be very transparent here. One of the things that I think I hit a wall because I felt overwhelmed. I overwhelmed myself. So in the Black culture, most of us are taught to, you know, run faster, be smarter, you know, go harder, because we start off not from the same vantage point. So you're working really, really hard. And I felt like I was overcompensating for everything. I mean, I was picking up slack from my peers. I was doing everything I could to be number one. And I felt like I was burning myself out. Wow. Guess what? I went to a lunch. It was just like this. It was like a women's summit, chairs, the whole nine. And it was a lady that was talking about calendaring and how to not get overwhelmed and, you know, what do you need to do? And she was a very successful sales executive. And she said, look, at the end of the day, you have to finally realize that you can't keep up. Our day, you can't keep up. You cannot get everything done that you have to get in one calendar day, in one day. You can't. So you know what you do? You do your best. And if you have 20 things on that list and you get 5 done, that is a great day and you count it good. Once I heard that, it spoke volumes to my soul. The next day I woke up, I checked my list. I was able to close my laptop. It was actually a desktop at the time, but walk away. I didn't sleep with my pager. I'm dating myself. My pager wasn't under my pillow. I went to.
I had a pager.
Yes.
Right there
but I went to sleep and I let it go, and I realized that I can't do everything and be everybody, but I'm going to be the best Kim I could. So that was another lesson for me.
I think that is so important. What you're saying.
Yeah, I heard some people. I love that.
That is huge, Kim, because we all, no matter what role, what title, what opportunity you get, there's always a bit of self-doubt. And you have to, if you don't believe, most people won't. So you have to believe in self. And the fact that you recognize that, again, going back to just being self-aware, reflecting and being in the moment and recognizing your value proposition. No one else has what you have. All of us are equally, individually, have a differentiated value proposition. No one can do what you do. No one can do what you do. And we have to be proud of that and understand that and not drive ourselves to these false realities of overwhelming ourselves. So well said, and thank you for sharing that.
So well said. I want to talk about just, I'm going totally, I know I'm supposed to ask another question, but just give me a minute. Whatever. I'll keep an eye on the time. I want to talk about imposter syndrome for a minute because I think women struggle with that quite a bit. I'm sure men do too, but I do, and it doesn't go away. But I had this really great conversation with an executive coach once, and it just reminded me to share this. She said to, because I was mad that I was feeling, I thought, I'm a certain age, like, why should I doubt myself? Like, don't I have it all figured out at this point in time? Well, the reality is you never do. If you're always challenging yourself, you're always learning, you're always trying to be your best version of yourself, you're always going to feel a little bit about that. But I came to her and I was like, I'm so sick of this. I should be over this. I'm, such and such age. And she walked me through this process and she said, well, what happens when you feel that way? And I was like, well, I work hard, I get focused, I, do the things. And she's like, and then what happens? And I'm like, well, I usually crush it. She's like, so your imposter syndrome is actually your friend, as long as you don't take it too far. Yeah. Right. That little bit of that edge is how you show up, because you always give the best of yourself. You're self-motivated. So I think it's also, you have this angst inside yourself. I actually struggled with it of like, well, I shouldn't feel like I'm not, worthy or whatever. Resisting it actually makes it even stronger. So just sort of embracing it and remembering that. And I thought it was a really good lesson, so I thought I would pass it on to all of you for whatever it's worth. Next time you feel that way, check in with yourself, and then you think, well, what am I doing about it? Am I having healthy thoughts about it? Am I bringing my best self? Am I not overworking myself, but doing the best I can? And use it as your energy too.
Absolutely.
So, along with the motivating signs. Okay, so since LaShonda has it all and she's figured it all out, that's my question. I actually have a two-part question, but I'm going to start with, we talk about having it all, and I think people often will look at somebody else and say, well, it seems like they have it all. They have the family, they have the things. Tell me a little bit about the idea of having it all to you, and have you figured it out? How have you gotten comfortable?
I don't have it all. Let me just say that. What I do have is optimism, and I have hope, and I have balance. The things, you talk about having all the things cost, y'all. The things cost time. The things cost family. The things cost financially. Yeah. Those things cost. So when you see a person, what often you don't see is we're all dealing with these emotions we're trying to balance and self-regulate because we've got these roles, these responsibilities. And so that's part of a thing that you have to balance as you go up or you expand your responsibility. So having it all, I think, is a fallacy. You can have it all, just not at the same time. I have 3 kids, 2 older daughters, 1 in medical school, 1 a junior in college, and I have a 16-year-old son. There is no way possible I could live the life I have now when my kids were younger. I would have had to trade off being the mother I had so wanted to be. I would have had to trade off being the wife I wanted to be. I would have to trade off being me. And so I'd say there's a notion of having it all. I think you have to find the balance. At different points in your life, we may call them seasons. At different seasons in your life, those opportunities come where you can begin to grow, you can begin to develop, you can begin to acquire the things, whether it's the right job, the right title, the right compensation, the right experiences to get you to that place. But if you try to put the pressure on yourself to have it all, to have the right car, the right house, the right brands, you're going to do what we just talked about. You're going to overwhelm yourself. And no one does. And if you talk to any successful leader, specifically a female, they will tell you, we are out of control at times. If you come to my house, thank God I have a cleaner I can afford to have one. But my house was not the cleanest when my kids were youngest. My house was a hangout house. My kids, I pressured them until I realized their life is theirs and mine is mine, and I have to balance what's most important to them and being a good mom. And so this idea of having it all in sales with the flexibility is helpful, but it's not real. I got to take my kids to lunch. I got to visit my kids for birthday parties and different events. Those are opportunities, and I have an opportunity to play a part in my parents' life. But it comes at a cost because the time I spend with them means I'm not doing something else. Yeah. So I don't think it's, Denise, it's about having it all. I think it's having it all at different points and seasons in your life. Yeah. And different things matter most. Yeah. As you age, you get wisdom. And as your family, scenario changes, you decide what's most important. And those things will change. I'll say this last thing, and Kim and I have a similar background. When I started my career at IBM, I interned at IBM, and I started as a sales professional. I wanted to be CEO. I thought, I'm going to bleed blue, and I'm never leaving, y'all. I thought that was going to be my future, till I realized, and I spoke with an executive, a female executive, she told me what her life was. She was on plane, trains, and automobiles. She never saw her kids. She was stressed out. She had eating issues. And I realized, is that what it takes? And the answer is no, but she shared, this is my life. So before you aspire to be that, educate yourself and make yourself aware of the trade-offs you're willing to make. And at different points, you may decide differently.
Yeah, and having it all too quickly sometimes ends up in a situation like that where you haven't been able to check in with yourself during the season of your life that you're at and what you need to prioritize, you know, and I think that's really well said. You can have it all, just maybe not all at once.
That's right.
All the time, right?
That's right.
And speaking of that, Hillary, I'm going to turn to you and extend this conversation about you're a revenue leader. You've been wildly successful. You also have 2 boys. How old are they?
8 and 6.
Yeah, those are good ages. I had teenagers. Anyone have teenagers? Yeah. Anyway, so 8 and 6 are great ages. 8 and 6 are great ages. So how have you, the other story I think that people talk about with women in sales is that you can't do it, just to the point. It's hard to do that as a pair. How have you navigated that? Being a parent and being in sales with some of the craziness that goes on.
Not well. I wish someone would have told me about that you can have it all.
It wasn't
but,
your season.
But different seasons for that piece. I think that's really great advice. For me, what I wish I would have done differently, because I didn't have kids until I was 35, is I just outworked people. And that's, I think frequently, yes, I'm smart and all those things, but like I just worked really hard, 70, 80-hour weeks. And so I just did the work of 2 people and was recognized for that and promoted. And then when I had kids, I realized I really needed to backpedal on that. And so I had to change my scope from 70 to 80 to 40 to 50 hours a week. And so my advice would be for folks who are thinking about a family, either if you are able to have kiddos yourself or adopt, or, I also have a 20-year-old stepson. You have to get really good at time, not just time management, which is, I think, par for the course, but your energy management. And what I mean by that is when you're at work, you can't think about all the things you're not doing at home. And when you're at home, not thinking about all the things that you're not doing at work. I've never been able to find a balance. But it's just being comfortable into what that piece is. And frankly, I wish I would have, at 25, realized that you don't actually need to have kids or a family to stop working so much. And that I wish I would have given myself that at 25
really good
to travel and see my parents or my grandparents at the time. And I just worked. And so for me, I waited. I was an older mom for sure. But I wish I would have realized that sooner and started to kind of scope in what I needed to do, because you don't need to have kids to slow down. Yeah. You can have your own life. And I think that's, I wish I would have heard that too.
Yeah, that's great advice. I remember that feeling like, wow, once you have children, you have to figure out how to get more done and prioritize other people. And it is that journey in your life that you actually figure that out. And it feels pretty good. You don't always get it right, but it does feel good. No, I don't get it right either. And I miss things. And, but I also think it forces you to grow as an individual. And it also makes space for other people too. Yeah. To help other people rise up and step in. And it's kind of fun to build other leaders.
And you quickly realize all the women who came ahead of you that were doing what they did, probably with way less resources and support, and just figured that out.
Couldn't talk about it.
I feel sometimes like a, kind of a schmuck when I was in my 20s, not realizing that's what those women were going through. It's hard.
Yeah. We're making it easier. It's not all the way easy, but Kim, I'm going to turn to you. Speaking about trying to make it better for the next generation. Every time we advance, we bring somebody with us. So you are a member of IBM's Black Executive Council, which is focused on the retention and career development of minority and women professionals. Can you tell me a little bit about why this is important to you, what you've learned from participating in that group?
First, I want Hillary to tell me why she keeps looking at me like she thinks I'm an older mom. I don't accept that.
No. You said I had young kids, and I was like, well, I had them when I was 35.
Yeah, I'm over that. I'm so over that. No, honestly, I will share this with you guys. My last baby graduates this weekend. So it's so important to me. I have 3 kids. I have my last one graduating. And when Shonda called me, I kind of paused and said, it's graduation week. You know how much a mom does for graduation week?
A lot.
And so at first I was going to turn down this invitation. And the other side of me said, no, that's why you're going to accept it. Because I'm accepting it for her. Because what we're talking about is going to make her life better. and it's important for me to be here. So I just wanted to share that, you know, I'm still going through what you go through, the choices. Which, should I be there? Should I fly in? You know, all of that. So
thank you for being here.
Absolutely.
Thank you for coming here
Absolutely.
and doing that.
I appreciate it. I appreciate the invitation.
And kind of acting your values. Of
Oh,
what's important.
absolutely, absolutely. And hopefully she's watching me right now. So back to
Your
why
mom is awesome.
right. Oh, why? Let's talk about Black Executive Council and why it's important. So, you know, fundamentally, I really do believe that for us that have now earned the right, that have a seat at the table, that we use the platform to voice for the underrepresented. That's why I do it. I do it because I know there are some sisters, some women of color that they don't have a vote at the table. So it's really, really important for me to spend the time, the extra time, as if we have it, but to be on these committees of DE&I and Black Executive Council. I also think it's important. I love our mission, career progression, women progression, amplification of our skills so that the business understands who we are and that we have really good skills so that they can consider us for positions. So it's really an important piece of the work that has to be done. And no matter how many times we say we have enough on our plate, someone has to do the work. So I dedicate a lot of my time to these organizations because they're really, really important to me. So that's pretty much. I mean, that's my answer. That's why I
didn't even need to ask you that question because we know why it's important. But the way that you just spoke about it to me is so inspiring, and showing up and continuing to show up and progressing careers is so important.
And lifting and climbing.
Exactly.
It's important that when you climb, you lift. You lift someone up. Because someone lifted me, by the way. You guys didn't ask me that question. But someone.
There you go.
Yes,
so
someone
tell
gave me.
us.
Here we go. It's the Kim Show.
Yeah, we got time. You got the floor. Go
Really,
ahead.
someone gave me a chance, and I'll never forget it. And he's my mentor today. He's retired, like 42 years. But he's retired now. But I talk to him monthly. After all these years, because first of all, he's one of my really good friends, but he took a bet on me, guys. I just told you, I was a Black female, was very young in my career. I think I was pregnant. You know, I had all kind of things going on. Yeah, exactly. I had a lot of things going on, but to take a chance on me to manage that group, and I told you it was all males.
13 men that
he
been around.
trusted me, and he knew that no one else would take a chance. So he put his exact words were, "I'm placing my bets on you." Wow. And you know what? When you have that support, let's talk about support and that security and someone that has your back, you're going to work harder.
Yeah.
Am I not right? You're going to work harder for that person.
Yeah.
So I knew at the end of the day, I wasn't going to let him down because he placed bets on me. So that's another reason why I do it.
Oh, I love that story. I love that story. All right, leadership. So that was your first role. LaShonda, I'm going to ask you about leadership. So sometimes we find, my experience is ultimately women will move into sales, and then when I want to talk to them about progressing in their career, moving into leadership, they'll usually say like, oh, leadership's a whole different thing. I don't know if I want to do that. So can you share a little bit about why you think that there is this perception that women are not capable of leading, maybe not capable, but maybe aren't right for leadership in sales, and what we need to do to kind of dispel that? What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I think, one, leadership is an action, it's not a title. Right, so in this room, there are a number of leaders. So I think we need to first also get really clear on what leadership is and what it's not. So when it comes to the leadership roles in terms of a title into a sales organization, I think, one, we need to really within ourselves understand the opportunities ahead of us are just an infinite opportunity for us to change roles, transition into different types of skills that we have to move into different opportunities. So I think our opportunity as a leader, myself and for my organization, we need to really think about what is the future of what work really looks like. The roles we have today in the organization will not exist in the next 2 years, and we've seen this over the last couple of years with COVID. And I think our opportunity, Denise, is to challenge the system. And so one of the things I like to sort of become in a meeting where we're talking about the same people over and over again is to be the agitator or the disruptor and ask, well, what about these individuals? All of you, and I talked about have a differentiated value proposition. We all possess a set of skills that are valuable. How do we really nurture those skills and those things that you don't even know you have in yourself? How do we bring those to light? And I think sometimes we get very comfortable with what we know. And there's a leader in this company who said her husband's an engineer, and he says people only like what they know and they only know what they like. like. So you only like what you know, and you only know what you like. We're so contained in some case with what we see.
The brain's almost wired.
It's wired
to know
in a certain
and
way.
recognize and see threats.
It absolutely is, and we are, because we're very focused on action. But I
Yeah.
think there's an opportunity as we think about succession planning, we think about role progression, we think about careers. We're having conversations with our people, and our people are having conversations with us, thinking beyond just the title. Let's talk about the experiences. We call it sales, but at the end of the day, and some organizations call it customer success. It's not about sales. It's about helping our customers get the very best out of their investment. So I think our opportunity, Denise, is to challenge the system. The opportunities for those in the room and online is to really self-reflect and figure out what are all the experiences you want, not just the role or the title, because the outcomes of what you deliver is really what we're going to be able to measure and where we're going to have success.
Yeah, and leadership is leadership is not a title. It is
That's
about
right.
how you act and how you show up. And when you love to help people be successful and the way that you show up, you're a leader.
That's right.
You're
That's
a
right.
leader. And I think that that's something that goes unnoticed a lot of times when people are talking about titles and roles and things like that. So,
And can I add one more thing?
Yes.
So this is what I would ask all the ladies in the room and online. I was on a call. Two things happened. I was on a call with a couple of young ladies, and we were talking about a topic similar to this. And one of the young ladies said, "I'm going to take notes." And I said, "You absolutely will not." And she said, "Oh, I don't mind." I said, "I do." So as women, we're not the note takers. We're not the coffee getters. We're not the table fixers. Like, we're not the party planners. We're leaders just like everyone else in the room. And so I just would advise, and it was not because she saw less in herself, but she just thought, well, you're the senior leader and I'm the less. And I'm like, no, it doesn't work that way. So there's a record button. We all have technology. There's a record button on Zoom and others. Use a record button. So don't volunteer. Sometimes we put ourselves back in that box.
Yeah.
Get out of the box. You don't have to be the greatest party planner, the greatest lunch creator. Ask the guy next to you and say, hey, you want to do lunch? Great, order me something. Like, right? I'm not doing the order. Like, just say, hey, we all have a set of skills. Looks like you have your phone out. Why don't you DoorDash us something to eat? Point being, don't put yourself back in the box. And we do that naturally because we are nurturers and we want to help. Our job isn't to save everyone. Save yourself first.
Yep. There's been a recent article on that of just the wasted time that women spend at work doing all of those things, like planning the party and going over here and doing that. It's just like, but it's already we're overworking and not feeling good about it. Like that's a great point.
To it. Okay, one last question specifically for you, Hillary, and then I'll do one more for all of us. So let's talk about knowing your worth. We're all aware of the gender pay gap, which is ironic to me because women are high performers in sales. They are known to be higher performers in sales, yet there's still a pay gap there. Can you talk to me a little bit about your perspective on that, but how you've navigated that?
Yes, I mean the pay gap exists. I'm always surprised when I talk to some women and they don't know that, and it's different based on the color of your skin. So for white women, I think we're rolling in at about 80 cents on the dollar for what that is. Similar to the radio station, I then worked at another one where there was forecasting that you had to do as remnant radio, like the price line of radio. And I was really good at it. And, and I think as sometimes it happens, at a happy hour, some of the guys started talking and they shared what they made and my jaw hit the floor. I was like, wait, what? Like, I'm doing way better than you. This isn't cool. So I called my mom. Like, luckily my mom is still alive. So I called her and I was like, hey, and I was kind of griping about it. And my mom is I'm from, I said South Dakota, but I'm from North Dakota. My mom is like a classic, like Midwestern, don't rock the boat, don't make a noise kind of a mom. And so she goes, well, you just need to ask for a raise then, Hillary. Basically, shut up and go ask for a raise. And I said, well, I can't do that. And she said, well, why not? And I said, well, what if they say no? And she goes, well, if they say no, then you know. And I was like, wow, Mom, you know.
So simple and obvious.
So simple and obvious. But it was one of those pieces where I'm like, okay, I'm going to need to ask for this and advocate for myself. And I put together my one-pager of why I needed a raise.
All prepared,
I
all
asked
the
for
details.
$5,000 on a $35,000 base. And he was like, yeah, no problem. I was like, I should have asked for 10. But that was a ton of money. That was a ton of money in that piece. But what's happened since then is I have asked for every raise that I've really ever had.
Wow.
So that has not changed. And every time I prepare and I look at data and I do the best that I can, and then I tell myself I need to act. And every time, like I am now, my voice shakes, my armpits sweat, I get very uncomfortable. But I do it because if I'm going to get on these types, like when I'm asked to do these types of things, I need to be able to share that. And if I'm hiding and not asking, then that's not good. And so I just encourage everybody that you have to ask.
Yes.
I don't think a lot of managers sit around and go, how can I pay people more?
No, right.
They don't. They're measured on it.
doesn't
And so you
happen.
just have to prepare and then act and then be ready for what the answer is going to be. And it might be no, and that's okay. And then you know that you can take a different course of action if you choose.
I love that. Your mom's advice is perfect.
And I've shared that before, but it keeps coming back to me. If it
Yes.
really kind of got me out of that rut of like, stop complaining, do something, and move forward if you can.
You don't get what you don't ask for, right?
Yeah, and ask for 10, not 5.
Right. Ask for a little bit more. Okay, I know we're over time, but I'm going to ask. Do I have time for one more question? Am I running the show here? We're going to
Go for it. Go for
right,
it, Denise.
okay.
You're running the show.
I'm running the
You're
show.
running the show. Go for
I
it.
am the boss right now. All right. So the last question is an easy one, but it's just thinking about paying it forward, taking this and what we all know in our experiences. What advice would you give? And I'll start with you, Kim. What advice would you give employers as they're looking to hire more women into sales, progress more women in their career? What advice?
I think number one of the things that companies could put in place and make sure they implement are programs that allow women to thrive, such allyship programs to help men understand, right? Programs, wellness programs, just like we talked about, from a scheduling perspective, roles, responsibilities. What does it take to be a woman, a strong woman leader? What do you need? I think programs are essential from a nurturing and support perspective for women.
Cohort perspective, yeah.
I think the other piece would be to have training for leaders, training for men, D&I training, inclusive training. Some men, women, people are uncomfortable with certain conversations. Why not beat them to that punch, right? Give them an enablement, the tools that they need so that they can implore, support, and nurture women. Provide the training. We have a great training program called Be Equal Training at IBM, where it actually teaches you a lot of things about D&I, being an upstander versus a bystander, microaggressions. I can go on and on, but it's a great program to inform, to teach, particularly men leaders, but people that are just uncomfortable having certain conversations. I think if those two things would be a game changer in corporations for women.
Great advice and great programs too. Yeah. Hillary.
A +1 on all those.
Yeah.
I'll give 2. 1, you need to support women in all kinds of sales. So make sure you're going to your local, locally owned women's shops, buy online, do whatever you need to do there. Yeah. The second would be similar to training. I got a call from a recruiter. I was like, yeah, sure. Let's see what this is about. He said, oh, it's great. We got Jim from this company for 10 years. He hired Jerry. Jerry brought in John. John brought in James, and James brought in Jeff. And I said, wow, 5 guys that have all worked together for 10 years. That's great. Not realizing he's describing the total bro culture that we all, love. And he goes, well, I'm not calling you just because you're a woman. And I said, no, I thought you were calling me because I'm qualified, if not overqualified for this role. So there we're at, there we are. And I think it extends into that, though, of you also have to know how you're representing your company on the front lines and how that's being shared. I appreciate that Jim, Jeff, and I'm exaggerating on their names, but it doesn't really make it feel like a great place to work or to join. If everybody knows each other and they all look the same. When you pull up their LinkedIn profile, you can only imagine the strategic navigation you would have to do to have a seat at that table and any influence. So I think there's also those kinds of smaller things of just knowing how you are representing your company externally and to women. If you do want to bring them in, even if you are the token woman, great. At least know how to represent that and own that. And be aware of those pieces.
Yeah, and hold a mirror up. I think that's it's just sort of a shocking conversation. I'm sure that person who called wasn't even thinking about what. Not even. I mean, it seems hard to believe.
And,
I know.
And my Midwestern, I don't want to rock training.
That's right. That's right. Right.
And it's hard to say something because you're like, do I want to be the person who speaks up? And then you get a reputation and you do all of that. And I just was like, well, that's a lot of men.
Yeah.
All working together.
They all look alike.
That all look alike.
They all look alike.
That all look alike.
LaShonda, what's your advice?
all plus ones. I'd say there are three things. One, what I'd ask our company, show me your receipts. Show me your data.
Yeah.
Yep. So everybody can talk about it, but you need to be about it. And the data comes from being about it part. The second thing is, I think we need to start earlier in the careers of young women. We need to do a lot more, especially in the early education years, formative years, high school, college. Be much more intentional and show people these faces, your experiences, because people do need to see people like them to see what's really possible. And the third thing is, when you put women in any management leadership position, you need to put your arms around them.
Yeah.
You really need to put the right program support, the advocates, the allies, the mentors, the sponsors, whatever you want to call it. There needs to be much more programmatic ways to help navigate the conversations that you probably wouldn't be familiar with because they all came from the same place. Yes. How do you break into that? How do you engage in a conversation and making it much more adaptable for those who are entering the workforce who may have been from non-traditional roles? Yeah. That is also important. There's so many women who took the time to raise their kids, took time off to truly be with their children, and they are ready and they are capable. We need to find a way to bring them back in a place where they can have impact contributions and get back to doing things that they love, because they have skills that we need.
Yeah, it's a different type of onboarding, though, as you
absolutely.
said.
Re-entry.
Yeah. Well, I'm way over my time, so thank you for letting me go a couple of minutes, but I wanted to get that last piece of advice. So first of all ladies, I want to thank you. Thank you, Kim, so much. You need to get back to that graduation. Hillary, thank you. LaShonda, I know you're on your way to New York. You flew out here for this, so thank you.
Absolutely.
That's a wrap for us.
Thank you.
All right. Thank you.
Great.
Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you, Denise, Kim, Hillary, and LaShonda, for enlightening and motivating all of us. It's definitely fascinating to see that women are crushing their quotas, getting ahead of the game, and balancing it all. So how's everyone doing today? Everyone feeling good? Yeah, great. So I'm excited about our next session around wellness. Let's face it, we all work very hard, but unfortunately we don't prioritize our wellness. So with that being said, please give a warm welcome to the stage our moderator, Dr. Geeta Nayar, Chief Medical Officer of Salesforce, and our guest, Dr. Jenny Wang, licensed psychologist, national speaker, author, and founder of the Asians for Mental Health community.
All right. Well, good morning, everyone. Thanks for being here.
Hello.
And Dr. Wang, thank you so much for being here.
Oh, of course.
I really just wanted to kick it off this morning and ask you to tell us a little bit about yourself and how you got into the mental health gig.
Ooh, where do we begin? Asian parents, that's where we begin.
I know a little bit about that.
Yes. So I would say that I was studying to become an accountant, and that was the path that felt secure, that felt safe for my Asian parents. They came here as immigrants. I was born in Taiwan, so really the path to mental health was something that was kind of a breaking free from some of those expectations, breaking free from those cultural kind of barriers that, mental health, how do you make money in mental health? How do you feed yourself? I think those are the initial concerns. And yet, I think even at a large public state university, there were so few Asian Americans who were pursuing, graduate studies in psychology. And so that really kind of gave me a sense that surely there's something about our identity, my identity being Asian American, that would inform mental health, which has been traditionally a very white, Eurocentric field.
So you hit on something that actually is part of my next question, which is that Asian Americans are always worried about food and feeding their children, right? That seems to be the answer to everything. So when we think about mental health and we think about the stigma of mental health, that's certainly different in different communities, but it's also a reality. Mm-hmm. And particularly in the Asian American community, it's not something we're really good at talking about or dealing with. I have a very dear Korean American friend who recently reached out to me and has been really struggling with a lot of anxiety, a lot of depression. And we grew up together. And she said, I tried to talk to my mom and dad about this. And they said, just eat something, you'll be fine. Right? So how do we navigate the mental toll that it takes on all of us to actually address it? Because addressing it is really the biggest issue. And then how to solve for it is really the second.
Absolutely. And I think, especially in our community, we've been socialized to kind of think of emotional distress as something that we don't want to show outwardly, right? There's a lot of that saving face kind of concept. And so it's not seen as a strength to say, oh, I'm feeling really depressed today, or even being attuned to ourselves, right? And in this kind of post-pandemic world where we've been living in these like rectangular boxes, there is even a disconnect there where we're not aware of how our body is processing stress. We're not aware of how it's impacting our emotional lives. And so I think the first thing I would think about is just, are you even attuned to your own experience? Can you notice how you're feeling really lonely and you're just pushing through each day, kind of in a loop? Or can you be attuned to the fact that you have back pain, migraines? The mind is so powerful that if it's not addressed, it registers in the physiology of our bodies. And so I think that awareness, that pause, I always kind of say to my clients, like, when's the last time you actually paused and just noticed how you felt? Noticed your emotional life? Because we're so used to keeping things in the margins outside of our awareness. And so can you create that space? But then secondly, addressing it, mental health, when it's addressed in isolation, can lead to shame, can lead to guilt, can lead to a sense that I can never get over this and nobody understands. And so can we address mental health with safe people? Are there friends? Are there colleagues? Are there managers who have created safety for you to say, hey, I'm really struggling today. I think I need to go home early, or I need to take a break, And I think when we can say that out loud, guess what? We realize other people are struggling too. It's not just us. And on top of that, it creates empathy and vulnerability between people. And that's healing in and of itself.
Great point, great point. So the Deloitte Chief Medical Officer reached out to me recently, and I wanted to bring this up because we're partnering with Deloitte today. And he sent me this paper that he had written on the healthcare savvy CEO. And he basically outlines that healthcare is the issue of the decade, right? Obviously ignited by COVID, but very much we've had this reminder of what you just said, which is number one, if we don't feel healthy or safe and secure, how can we possibly get together, right? Whether it's in the workplace, around the workplace, in our own lives. Mental health, obviously a part of that. Wellness, well-being, and just the CEO, I know our CEOs, right? Saying like, I worry about your health. I want you to be healthy. I don't want you to have to make the choice between your health and your job. And how does that come together? And basically the paper outlines that healthcare is just the topic, the number one topic and priority for every CEO, not just healthcare CEOs that I talk to, but in every customer conversation I have, this comes up. In every employee conversation. I know a lot of folks are struggling with this formula issue. Healthcare doesn't go away. It's part of our everyday life. And so from your perspective, why is wellness so important, and why have we just realized it now?
I think when we think about its importance, for a long time, it almost felt like in our workspaces, health was something we did outside. Right? We kept it separate. Like, I exercise when I get off work. I go see a therapist outside of work hours. And I think that pandemic almost like blurred all of those boundaries a little bit, right? Like, I would have clients like hop on a call with me for a session and then go right back to work. And so we started to see some of that categorization kind of break apart. And I think people also, in our isolation, in our moments where we were wondering when this would end, and we were worried about family members and their health, it really amplified the need to say, wait, this might be the foundation to a life well lived. And I think prior to this, perhaps there was a sense of achievement, of accomplishment. Those were the drivers. And I think we now realize that even if I have those things and I'm miserable, or I'm lonely, or I'm anxious and having panic attacks, that is not worth sacrificing my health for.
So it's currently Asian American and Pacific Islander Heritage Month, as well as Mental Health Awareness Month. And you recently published a book called Permission to Come Home, Reclaiming Mental Health as Asian Americans. Can you talk to us a little bit about some of the stigmas surrounding mental health within the community and why you're advocating for the reclaiming of mental health care among the Asian American community?
Absolutely. And I think these stigmas actually run across cultural lines. It's not just Asian Americans that struggle with mental health stigma, right? And I think there's this sense that mental health for a long time was framed as something that was really severe, right? We're talking like schizophrenia, institutionalization, hospitalization. That was what mental health was. And I think media has kind of promoted that sense that mental health is something in the very severe extreme forms. But I hope with this book, we realize that mental health is in every single minute of your day. It's how you make decisions. It's how you notice whether or not you're resonating with a colleague. It's in whether or not you feel confident and secure to speak up and advocate for yourself. That is all mental health, right? And our mental well-being or fitness then defines how you show up in every single space in your life. And so the reclaiming, I think, is this idea that let's actually repackage mental health as something that is as vital as water, as sleep, right? As exercise and movement. How do you create spaces in your day for the mental health prevention that is necessary? And I'm a big proponent that if you don't protect that mental health piece, your life is not sustainable. Right? You can do the grind for the short term, but can you do this for 5 years? Can you do this for 10 or 20? And at what cost? Because you have families, you have partners, you have aging parents. They are all depending on you as well. And so I think that's why mental health is crucial, especially now.
Dr. Wang has this really beautiful, soft, calming voice. I can understand why you went into the right field. So we've all been witnessing a rise in anti-Asian sentiment with a rise in violence against members of the Asian community. Can you speak to us about the long-term impact this can have on mental health and well-being?
So I think if you're a person that has a marginalized identity, you can already understand the mental toll, right? That there's a part of who you are that maybe society doesn't value or society doesn't really appreciate or even honor. And so I think cultural and ethnic identity is one facet of that, but there are many intersectional pieces to who we are. And so when we think about kind of how then that identity intersects, when I feel as though I need to be scared or worried about my place on my team, or if I need to be consciously aware of how I show up and I need to do it perfectly when I meet with my leader, that creates a sense of threat. And when the mind feels threatened, it starts to shut down. It starts to narrow possibilities. It impacts perception and memory even. And so if people are feeling safe, if my marginalized identity is something where somebody says, I actually really appreciate that facet of you, then it starts to open up the possibilities of how I show up and how I can do it confidently, how I can take up space and embody my ideas, my input, my opinions. And I think that is huge in the workplace, right? Because if I feel scared because of my marginalized identity, guess what? I shrink myself. I minimize myself. And it does not foster a space for innovation, creativity, collaboration. All of those things suffer, which is why I think psychological safety in the workplace is crucial, especially right now.
More and more employees are leaving companies, their jobs, because of mental health reasons. Why is it important for companies to invest in mental health support, not only for their employees, but for their businesses as a whole? And we talked a little bit about this with the Deloitte paper.
Mm-hmm. So, I mean, many of us, right, work in fields where the bottom line is important. And we wouldn't have jobs if those bottom lines weren't met. At the same time, we know that when employees, when managers and leaders are feeling healthy, feeling engaged, feeling alive, and in spaces that are life-giving, that is when they're able to be most effective. And so in prioritizing mental health in the workplace, it can be as simple as when you have a team meeting, you check in. You say, hey, how's everyone doing? Right? Or what is something that you're growing in? Because when we foster a sense of we make mistakes, we fail here, we challenge each other, we open space for that vulnerability, people feel psychologically safe. And so when we build that trust, when we build that vulnerability, even in the workplace, that allows people to show up as their whole selves. And when you can show up as your whole self, I think the company benefits.
100%. I do want to take just a minute to remind folks of the mental health support programs that we have here at Salesforce. So remember, through Lyra, we have therapists. Through BetterUp, we have coaches, including sleep consultants. And remember, your mental health and your physical health are connected. So making sure you have a doctor, they know who you are, you know who they are. Virtually, we offer that again virtually through telemedicine. So take advantage of these programs because I couldn't agree with you more. It's so important, so important. So what advice do you have for women? I call this my just say no question, so I'm going to get to the punchline here, right? What advice do you have for women when it comes to setting boundaries, and why is this important?
I think as women, we are often socialized to be selfless. Like, how many times have you been praised for being, you're so selfless, you're so sacrificial?
Especially Asian American moms, right?
That's right. And I think it's in a way, right, I'm not saying that that's a bad thing, right? Because there are times where we are called to be that way and show up that way. At the same time, at what cost, right? And I think that part of us being able to understand, right, that we are part of the equation in every single relationship in our lives. And I think a lot of times we say, well, in service of someone else, I will remove myself, right? I will expend all my resources to make sure my kids are taken care of, that my relationships are doing well. And then guess what? We realize there's a little seed of resentment there. We're a bit frustrated when we haven't had our alone time, or we haven't been able to meet with people that give us nourishment in our relationships. And so boundaries really, I always say, we don't set boundaries with people if we never intend to maintain the relationship. What would be the point, right? You would never see them again. We set boundaries to show up in relationships well, to stay connected such that I am an equal part of this relationship. And so it's about preservation of resources, right? Your time, your capacity, your emotional labor. All of that is part of why we protect those things. And I think in certain cultures, self-care, right, boundaries, they're seen as selfish or disconnecting, right? If I draw a line between us and I say, this is how I would like to engage, it can feel as though we're cutting people out. But I almost feel like, no, we're actually drawing a bridge. The boundary allows that person to honor your needs and your desires and vice versa. And so I think boundaries and saying no, we need to practice, right? We need to do that every single day. And it could be as simple as, no, I will not bake cookies for the bake sale today. I do not have time, right? Or it can be telling my partner, I can't take the kids for 7 hours today. I need a break. How can we make that happen? And what happens is then we align with critical people to solve that need together. But they can never help you solve it unless you communicate the need in the first place.
I buy all the cookies from my daughter's bake sale and I wrap them in aluminum foil routinely. It is a house joke, but it works for us.
Yes.
So on the flip side, right, if you have a manager or you are a manager and you want to help your team find or attempt balance, right, what advice do you have for managers on advising employees to disconnect and, actually mean it?
So I always say, people say what they want you to believe they think, but they act in the way of what they truly feel internally. So when people say oh yeah, log off, don't respond, just take a break. But then they're texting you and they're emailing you and they're getting in touch, right? That doesn't convey a sense that I truly can take that time for myself. So I'm a huge proponent of blocking time. If it's important to you, you will block and protect that time fiercely. And so as a manager and leader, can you do that for your employees? Where you say, this is a no contact block of time. You are completely free to do what you need to do. Take care of yourself. Go for that walk in the middle of the day, right? When there's actually sunlight and you're able to enjoy nature. Or blocking schedules for people to go to therapy, to go to doctor's appointments, and not making people feel as though they need to hide it or maybe not tell the truth of what they're doing, right, in their self-care. And can we integrate that into a person's life? Because guess what? When it's 5 or 6 or whenever you're done with work, you have things that now you need to take care of that is outside of the work sphere. So how do we integrate that into the work day, knowing that that pays dividends even in the work sphere?
And also leading by example, right?
Yes.
I hear you saying lead by example.
Absolutely.
We know that the pandemic has taken a record number of women out of the workplace. Why is it important to reassess our society's relationship with wellness in order to actually retain and keep top talent that are female?
So I have a kind of running joke with my friends, not a joke, but an observation that women who've stepped out of the workforce, either to take care of aging parents, people who are ill in their family, or just their children, they are the largest untapped resource for companies. And I stepped out of my job for many years to be a mom, to balance my partner's career, as well as just wanting to be home with my kids. But if there had been opportunities where I could have done both, where people structured those days a little bit differently, that we didn't hold on to this old school model that if you're working, you can't step away or you can't engage, right, in different things, I think I would have stayed, right, in that workforce for a little bit longer in that season. And so I think that women, because we are caregivers, we are people who are nurturers, but we are also leaders. We are people who empower and connect with other people in such wonderful ways. And so I think wellness is not just therapy, it's not just the exercise, it's restructuring the system altogether to make it more accessible and inclusive for women who have many, many demands. And as a leader, do I ask you about your mom and how her cancer treatment's going? Do I ask you about how your kids are struggling when you've shared that to me? That gives a sense of trust that my leader is attuned to my whole being versus just what I can produce.
So Dr. Wang, you're a psychologist. I'm a physician. People assume, patients assume, our families assume we've got it down pat. Right? We know exactly how to do this whole work-life balance thing. We got a hack for everything. I do have a hack for almost everything. What is your tips? What are your tips for the audience that are really trying to find that semblance of work-life balance and to find that space for mental health well-being?
I feel as though this idea of balance has never really resonated with me. Like, I have never felt at any point in my life where all of these places were kind of in this equal scale and everything is running really well. And it's not to say that things were falling apart or not, but I almost feel like when I don't feel a sense of balance, I punish myself. I criticize myself. Why can't I balance my life, right? And I don't think that that's even the right mental model for what that looks like. And I think that one way it's been phrased is this idea of like a water wheel or a flywheel effect, where when there are parts of my life that are feeling really empowering and I feel successful and I feel taken care of there, I show up as a better mother because I'm feeling safe and engaged and empowered in this space. And so it's almost like as there's this life energy that is being drawn from multiple spaces in my life, it overflows into those other spaces. But I also don't believe that we can have it all at the same time. And I think that there are going to be times where you will need to turn into those value sets and decide right now what matters the most. And that means that I will now put away these other facets for the time being to prioritize that piece. So balance almost feels like a misnomer or a myth. But could you see yourself as a dynamic, I don't know if it was an equation, right? There are parts that are moving and changing all the time. And the end result is, do I feel like I'm in a place where I am grounded, I'm centered, and I feel effective in what I do? And maybe that's what we're looking for in the end.
I think that's great advice. I also often tell folks that sometimes it's 10 minutes. Right? Too often we set out and we're like, I'm going to run a marathon and a triathlon, or I'm going to go on a vegan plant-based diet. And we have like really high aspirations, especially I know all the perfectionists that work at Salesforce, right? It actually only takes 10 minutes sometimes, right? And there is an app for almost everything, whether it's meditation, whether it's a workout, whether you want to learn some new exercises. There actually is a way to make 10 minutes in your day for whatever that might be, right? Different strokes for different folks is what I say. And I try very hard to do this myself. Again, I won't pretend to have all the answers. But I also find that as a working mom, bringing your kids into it. Yes. So I do some of these things with my daughter, and I do that for two reasons. One, it's a 2-for-1, it's quality time, right? But I also want to show her that she, in her own life, that health is important in my life, and I want to model it for her. And we compete, and I often lose, right? She loves doing burpees. I only can do a half burpee, right? Shocker. But I've actually gotten comfortable with that. To say, hey, for this workout, this is what I can do, right? Or this meditation is the one that, mommy really likes. This is the one Sonia really likes. And we've found a rhythm largely because of the pandemic, right? But we have really made that a bonding activity for us. And as a family, and it's stuck, but it's 10 minutes. We don't do more than 10 minutes. My daughter doesn't have more than 10 minutes for me sometimes. So I think you have to find pieces to your point, and every day that might look a little different. Well, Dr. Wang, thank you so much for being here. We really enjoyed the conversation. For those that want to continue the conversation with her, please look for her anywhere on social media, Instagram, Facebook, Twitter. She's out there at Asians for Mental Health. Her website is www.jennywangphd.com. And her book that she signed for me that I'm going to go home and read after this is available at Amazon, Barnes & Nobles, everywhere that they have books. And we are just so thrilled that we were able to have you today. Thank you so much.
Of course. Thank you all. Thank you.
are missing. We are missing from so many rooms, classrooms, boardrooms, everything in between. But we are here. We are programmers and coders, animators and analysts, engineers and entrepreneurs, designers, builders, creators, the bringers of change. We are here. We are here leading. We are here innovating. We are here working for our vision of better companies, communities, and countries. We are here. We have always been here. Our stories, our voices, our ideas have always mattered, more than mattered. And we won't stop asking more of the spaces that need to make space for more like us. All of us, all different types of us.
Now our next session is truly an inspiration. It's a conversation with women leaders who blaze unique trails and take the opportunity to change the landscape for those that follow. Please welcome to the stage our moderator, Lucia Taylor Hundley, Vice President, Global Equality Recruiting and Strategy of Salesforce, along with our guest speakers, Claudia Gordon, T-Mobile's Senior Accessibility Partner, who previously worked as a disability liaison for the Obama administration and made history as the first deaf woman attorney in the United States, and Daisy Auger Dominguez, Chief People's Officer and Vice Media Group and author of Inclusion Revolution.
Welcome. It is so great to see such beautiful faces in the audience today and our beautiful panelists as well. So we're going to go ahead and jump right in to make sure we stay on track. So we have some very accomplished panelists sitting with me on the stage today. You both have done so much from a professional and personal perspective. I'd like to start by asking you to introduce yourselves and tell us a little bit about your career journey. Yes, please.
Hi, everyone. I am still getting used to seeing humans in the human form, so it's really exciting. Right? And those of you on video. I'm Daisy Auger Dominguez. I am Chief People Officer at Vice Media Group. I have spent the last 2 decades of my career building and shaping people and culture practices with a focus on diversity, equity, and inclusion. But prior to that, I started my career in finance, actually. I launched my career at Moody's Investor Service as a credit risk analyst. So there is life after finance, for those of you who may be considering that. I was born in New York City to teenage parents. My father is Dominican, my mother is Puerto Rican, so that is my ethnic heritage. And I live in Brooklyn with my husband and a 13-year-old daughter.
Thank you. Claudia?
Hi there, everyone. I can echo what Daisy had just said, whereas I'm used to, for the last couple of years, being on a screen. So it's nice to finally start returning to in-person events again and get that human touch. We know that can't really be replaced in a virtual experience. So, and it's such an honor to be sharing the stage with these wonderful trailblazing women, Lisa and Daisy, today. My career journey, I think it's important before I dive in to discuss that, mentioning that we have to understand a little bit about the backdrop of who I am. I'm Jamaican. I was born hearing on the beautiful island of Jamaica, and overnight I lost my hearing when I was 8 years old. It was a terrifying experience for me. It was unsettling at the time, and I didn't know what it meant to be deaf. I didn't know what it was like to be myself and then be deaf on top of that. I lived in a society in Jamaica where there was really no understanding or awareness of people with disabilities, and the term disability did not even exist in our vocabulary. So we were called all sorts of different names. I was pulled out of school at that time for the remainder, and so thanks to my mom, who I would call a trailblazer herself. She just had an 8th grade education, and she did janitorial work, but I think at the time she was even a trailblazer as well. Moved me to the South Bronx, so have that in common, New York City, when I was 11 years old. So I lost my hearing when I was 8. I was not in school then again until I was 11, and I arrived in New York and went on from there and went back into the education system. I did internalize a lot of ableism at that time. So the way that society treated me, the attitudes towards me, I felt that my life had no purpose. Goals and dreams, I really felt that there was no reason for me to dream because of how I had internalized that oppression. Fortunately, and somehow I was able to pivot, and after I attended a school for the deaf at that time. I met other deaf peers of mine and realized I was not the only deaf person in the world. I thought, at that time that I was, and I realized in those experiences that I could really experience the world differently and using a visual language, using sign language. And so I was able to acquire and learn sign language. I taught myself at that time. In my teenage years is really when that flourished. And that's just a little bit of a backdrop of who I am. But early I realized I wanted to become an attorney based on my own experience with oppression and discrimination. So that really led me to attend law school in turn and went to undergrad at Howard University in Washington, D.C. And from there, I started my career at the National Association of the Deaf Law and Advocacy Center, where I provided representation to individuals like myself who are deaf or hard of hearing, deaf-blind, who are experiencing discrimination based on communication barriers and lack of access. So from there, I went to work for the federal government for almost 15 years, Department of Homeland Security, the National Council on Disabilities, and then the Obama administration, which was mentioned earlier during my introduction. So right now I work with T-Mobile, and I'm a senior accessibility strategist. So there I'm leading our amazing company's efforts to become and provide a more inclusive culture and workplace for our employees and customers with disabilities.
Thank you. Oh my goodness. Such talent on the stage with us today. Ladies, thank you so much for sharing so much about yourselves. And we'll be talking about more as we go through the questions. So this is for both of you. We're going to talk a little bit about embracing your identity and intersectionality, some of my favorites. Mm-hmm. So first we'll start with you, Daisy, and then we'll switch over to Claudia. How has embracing your identity and navigating life at so many intersections shaped you and influenced your career path?
Oh, it absolutely has shaped every decision that I've made, every doubt and every uncertainty that I've faced. Like my colleague here, Claudia, I like to joke that I did the opposite migratory pattern. I was born in New York City, raised in the Dominican Republic, and then came back to the U.S. when I was 16. And I often joke that I had grown up being Dominican and Puerto Rican and surrounded by a lot of racial, ethnic, and national diversity. However, when I came to the U.S., I was placed in this box. I became Hispanic. All of a sudden, that was the identity that everyone seemed to fit me into. And it was as if I couldn't escape the stereotype-filled assumptions about what it was to be Hispanic in the U.S. Yes. Right? I would meet people and they would be surprised that I spoke English fluently, as if that was impossible. They would immediately assume that I was here illegally. I was born in the United States. I have a blue passport just like the rest of you. Yes. There was a sense of being poor and uneducated, and quite frankly, I came from a working class family. There was a little bit of all of that, but it seemed to place me in this box that carried with me every experience that I had, from college selections to going to graduate school after I went to Bucknell University as an undergrad, and on this coming Sunday I'm going to be delivering the commencement speech for the class.
That's awesome! Congratulations!
An immense honor, and so I've been reflecting a lot. Thank you so much. I've been reflecting a lot on my experiences and how much college was a period for me to spent a lot of time reflecting on what it was to be a Latina, what it was to be an American, what it was to be Dominican and Puerto Rican, what it was to come from a rich heritage of Afro-Latino background and to claim that, to have been raised in a country that was half the Dominican Republic and half Haiti, which was the location of the first slave revolt in the Americas. But I didn't learn that till I came to the United States. Right? I wasn't taught that in my homeland for all of the obvious historic, racist legacies that we all face. And so coming to terms with all of that was about me, right? About the human that you see here in front of you. But this human is the person that walks into workplaces every day. And this is the human that sits in front of managers and leaders and employees. And throughout my career, from most of the time in the early part of my career, being the only Latina. We're Latinx now, but when I'm old. So when we started, we were Latinas, but being the only Latina, being the only woman, in the early part of my career, being the younger person, dealing with all those intersectionalities and the insecurities that come from it, the perceptions that you're managing across the way, and then getting to a place where that's my magic. That's right. I was like, this is who I am. Knowing that the different career inflections that I have been through and the opportunities that I have both been given and earned, because sometimes we feel like everything is given to us and we forget that we work really hard and that those are our achievements. Many of those places and opportunities that served as catalyzing moments for my career were because I worked hard, were because I was smart, were because of all of those things that we like to say. And they were also because of my heritage. They were also because I grew up deeply knowing who I was. And that, once I worked through that, I realized that's my comfort and my courage and my confidence comes from knowing who I am. And being made to feel shamed for who you are, that doesn't serve anybody. It doesn't serve you. It doesn't serve anybody else. However, it is how in most organizations we kind of just walk into these spaces and we give up small parts of ourselves. We let our courage shrink.
I love that.
We let our voices be diminished because we have heard these messages over and over again. And for me, I will tell you, and I'm asked often, when was the time that you found your voice? It wasn't one moment, right? It was a series of moments. It was a series of experiences. I call it, I was building my courage muscles all along, but my courage muscles were all deeply tied to my identity. And knowing that I walk into places and the magic that I have is because I am Dominican and Puerto Rican, and because I am from New York, and because I am from the places that I have lived, and because I come from where I come from, and because I have a family that no matter what I do always reminds me who I am and where I come from. And because I am a mother now raising a young woman who is Dominican and Puerto Rican and French and Italian, and raising her with all of that multiple identity reminds me often of how amazing it is to be able to just show up, because we all want to feel seen, valued, and understood. Every single one of us, no matter where we come from. And it took me time to realize that what I needed is the same thing that all of us need, and that when I show up as me, I create space so that others do the same.
That's right. That's right. And finding your voice, I mean, that's power in itself.
Oh, yes.
And I don't think many of us realize the intersectionality. Oh, my gosh, you know. It's a village, and that whole village gives you more power.
Yes.
Thank you for that, so everyone can hear you. But thanks so much for sharing. And I also want to thank you for calling out, like the Afro-Latinas, you know. They expect us to say, hey, we're black because the external looks some way. But there are so many different pieces of us, you know, as well. So I love even the diversity that we're talking about.
I remember, I know you're going, but I'll just say this. I used to work at Google several years ago, and I was the executive sponsor for the Latino employee resource group. And I remember sitting in front there, and I remember someone saying, well, you know, we should engage with the black Googlers as well. And I looked around, and I was like, you know, we come in black too.
Literally.
We come in all parts of the African diaspora didn't escape us. It actually was built through us. And until we acknowledge that and speak to it, and until we acknowledge the challenges that we have ourselves with how racism manifests in our culture, then we won't be truly free.
Thank you for saying that. Thank you. So we're going to transition. Great words of wisdom here. So Claudia, do I need to repeat, or because we've said a mouthful?
I think I remember the question, yes. So it's how the intersectional identity has shaped my career, if I remember correctly?
Yes.
Yeah? Okay. Well, I mean, I really just want to kudos to Daisy over here. Listening to you, listening with my eyes, of course, as usual, listening to you, I really think that we can both say that we're here and we are where we are today because of our intersectionality and because of those identities, not despite of it, right?
That's right.
And the fact that I can sit here and proudly declare that that is really progress for me personally, because there was once upon a time in my life that I was ashamed of my deafness. It was a source of shame for me, to be honest. And my poor mom, we were poor, but I kept losing my hearing aids after we immigrated here, and I would be brought to the audiologist to figure out, any way that we can regain my hearing loss at the time, try to reverse it. Of course, there was nothing they could do. We didn't know that then, but I would have my hearing aid out in public and I wouldn't want to be seen wearing it. And so I would hide it, lose it. So looking back today, that was internalized ableism and viewing the world via people without disabilities lens and the lens that is created for us, imposed upon us. So really, my intersectional identity has molded my career greatly, starting very early when I decided that I wanted to go to law school. And, you heard my introduction as the first Black, deaf, female attorney. Well, I have kind of a funny relationship with that first type of language because there's people before me who were just as smart, just as ambitious, just as driven as I am, who never had a chance to be the first because all of those artificial barriers that society threw in their path. So I'm fortunate of everything that I've been able to achieve. However, it's not lost on me the lack of representation that we have. And really just, to be totally frank, we live in a society that has centuries and centuries worth of infrastructure that was not designed for people like you and I, right?
That's true.
Black women with a disability. That infrastructure that we live in is designed for white, able-bodied, male-dominated society, I would say. And I think convenings like this, all of us being here, we're in the process of trying to dismantle that and to then create a new infrastructure where we, people like me, where we live sort of on the margins of multiply marginalized identities, can thrive and live with dignity on the day-to-day with all of our different identities being respected and embraced, and where it's intentionally being included and meaningful access is provided. I want to create that world, that new infrastructure, and therefore I've been setting off on my path to kind of make sure that I'm able to further myself in my education. And then I've also been heavily involved in my community for a very long time. I came here straight from the ACLU conference in LA, where I sit on the DC ACLU board. Just because I'm a person with disability doesn't mean that I'm limited to only being in those gatherings. I care about reproductive rights just like every woman with or without a disability. I care about equal pay and trying to get rid of that gender gap in pay once and for all, because I am a woman as well, right? I know oftentimes I walk into a space and spaces that claim to be about women or about Black women, but then I'm looked at as an imposter because they expect me to stay in the disability space, only where I check that box. Instead, I think in my career, I've been holding spaces accountable for a long time to embrace the diversity, that true diversity that you can have within each of those. And if you claim to be about women, I'm going to show up and make sure that you're about all women. If you claim to be about Black women, we have to be about all Black women, period. And, I have a sister in the movement, Yomi Wrong. Just recently at the ACLU conference, she was moderating a session between the ACLU president and the executive director. And she's a little person in a wheelchair. So she was sitting in between two powerhouse individuals, and she commanded the room. What really stuck with me was that she told the audience, you all are not free until I'm free.
I love that.
And so you look around, see who's here, notice who's in the room. If you notice gaps, that means that we're doing our movement and doing our cause a disservice by not being inclusive fully. So that's really the heart of my career. That's been the driver for a very long time, so that every place and every job that I've had, the common denominator in all of those has really been access and inclusion, and in a meaningful way, not just lip service. We really have to be intentional about it.
Thank you for sharing that. And I agree completely. Access, advocacy, it opens the door. It helps from an inclusive perspective and helps break down some of those infrastructures that you were talking about. Systemic racism is definitely real. We still have a lot of work to do as well. And speaking of that, we're going to sort of pivot a little bit. We're going to talk about inclusion revolution. Daisy, in your book, Inclusion Revolution, you offer tools for managers to address issues of race, power, and exclusion to build change that lasts. Why was it important for you to write this book?
Well, first of all, it's my life's work.
Okay, tell us more.
As Claudia was mentioning, I think a lot of what I know a lot of what drove my desire to write Inclusion Revolution came out of my own experiences in the workplace. And as I shared earlier, moving up the ranks in some of the world's most admired companies. I've worked at Google, I've worked at Disney, I've worked at Viacom. I've worked at some pretty impressive organizations. But it's actually not that strange to be hired at some of the world's top companies, be included in the top leadership teams of those companies, be invited to important meetings, and even be asked to speak, and still feel that people like you don't belong there. That's been my experience in the workplace, and not just mine. In the early part of my career, I saw so many talented Black, Latino, Asian, people with disabilities, LGBTQ, you name it, people of difference, sidelined and marginalized, not because of their ability to do their work, because they could, but because of their identity, because they didn't fit the norm of white professional norms in those organizations. And so I wrote Inclusion Revolution as a love note to managers. Really, anybody can read it. But it's intended for managers because so much is coming at them. It is so much more complex and how many managers in the room? People managers. Yes, it's hard to be a people manager right now. It's gotten a lot harder. But guess what? Your responsibility, the impact that you have on your employees is the strongest that you will ever have. All of us, when we leave organizations, we don't leave companies. We leave the people that we work with. We leave the managers that have treated or mistreated us. And I wanted to be able to provide practical, very intentional, both inspiring and operational feedback that would allow you to look at the entire employee life cycle. So the book goes through recruitment to onboarding, performance management, you name it, the entire experience, providing listening series and surveys and feedbacks, all of the things that we take for granted, and that the questions that we do not ask and the behaviors and practices that often go unquestioned when it comes to race and gender and ethnicity. And I wanted to be able to provide that. And I also, quite frankly, wrote the book because I've grown tired of short-lived promises.
All right.
I wanted to say, this is it. If you want to be a manager in the 21st century, this is a skill set that you need. This is not a nice to do. This is not a luxury. This is a necessity. And here are the tools to do it. So it grew out of my own lived experiences, the experiences of others that I witnessed, and my long-lived dreams and aspirations of creating workplaces that work for everyone, because we can do it. It's not an intractable, out there kind of thing to get there. We actually can achieve it if each of us does one thing every day to get us there.
Congrats. Thank you so much for sharing. And I can't wait to tell others about the book as well.
Please. And tell me and give me feedback as well.
Love it. Thank you. And speaking on, just providing, a workplace for everyone. We have here at Salesforce, our Accessibility Summit is also occurring this week. And so I want to pivot now to Claudia talking about accessibility. What do companies need to do right now to better address accessibility for people with disabilities? on the path to better inclusion. So in 2021, the unemployment rate for people with disabilities was 10.1%, about twice as the rate of those without a disability. So what can companies do to support people with disabilities in the workplace?
Thank you for that question. Very passionate about disability employment. You know, I think first, be intentional. Be really intentional about it. The ADA, the Americans with Disabilities Act, was passed as law 32 years ago this July. And before the ADA, we had Section 504 of the Rehab Act, which also prohibited discrimination based on disability, and that was 1973. So since then, you know, we're continuing to see just very high unemployment rates with people with disabilities. Disability employment success should be the unfinished business of the ADA. And we talk about the unemployment rate. We're also having to look at the percentage of people who are in the working age population, people with disabilities. Historically, only 20 to 23% are in the labor force. And then you look at that number even further, it includes the unemployment rate. So then we also have people who are considered to just kind of have resigned themselves because they've been so discouraged of looking for employment and have faced so many barriers in trying to find work, compared with the labor force participation of 20 to 23, compared to general population of people without disabilities is about 70%. So we have to get beyond talking, studying, and fretting over the issue and be intentional about disability inclusion and access. So that's first off. Second off, we have to center and really intentionally bring in people with disabilities in this work itself. If you can't see us as equal partners in this, helping to move the needle, we're, again, doing a disservice to the effort.
Yes.
And, you know, it's not a charity by bringing people in. You know, we're here to provide creative and innovative solutions to this ongoing work and issue of disability unemployment. I'm very proud of T-Mobile having created this, my position last year, and making sure that disability inclusion and access is an integral and central part of our diversity, equity, and inclusion efforts. Because it shouldn't be dealt with separately. It shouldn't be put to the side. It really should be integrated because disability is part of human diversity. It's the only group and really the only marginalized group that anyone can join at any time, right? So really building a society for your future selves, keeping that in mind, building a workplace for your future selves and your potential children, friends, relatives, think about all of these potential members of the disability community, and in doing that, center people with disabilities in the work that we are doing so that we can be a part of a solution. We know best, you know, we know what works for us. And another thing that I'll put out there based on the work that I'm doing right now with T-Mobile is understand your accessibility ecosystem where you are and all of the interdependencies that are there. This space is not the work of one person or one team. So in that case, we have to work cross-functional and not in silos and really break those barriers down. The digital accessibility team has to work with the reasonable accommodations team to make sure platforms and tools are usable and accessible, so that a person who's blind and uses a screen reader can access a training, for example. So the learning and development team has to work with digital access. And you can see kind of how this web starts to grow. It's not siloed work, it's cross-functional. So really emphasizing that collaboration and coordination. And resources need to be dedicated. We can't do this work without resources. And when I say resources, I mean money and people. So we need people with the right skill set, not just another duty as assigned, so to speak. Also making sure to leverage any external resources. There's no shortage of consultants out there, companies today who are doing this work. Disability In is one that I can name, the National Organization on Disability, Valuable 500. Just to throw out a few, they have their Harkin Institute. I've got friends of mine like Andrea Levant, who is a person with disabilities, a black woman, who has her own consulting company to help companies really drive their inclusion and access efforts and to provide those resources and find those resources internally. There's no question, you know, challenge that employers are facing today. where one company has solved something, they've been through it, and now you can kind of work together and leverage those experiences and your peers in those sister organizations to identify those challenges and pain points and work together to find out what solutions are out there or have been accomplished. We have to get beyond the talking and really become more intentional with action, because for us in our opportunity, work is not just about getting a paycheck. You know, it's about self-respect, it's about dignity, and being able to get up every day and have a purpose in life and be contributing to our society. It's long overdue. Yeah.
Thank you for that. Gosh, a lot of great nuggets today, and this session went by really fast. You know, I could speak to these ladies for another hour or so, but we've quickly run out of time. Some key things that, you know, takeaways: access, inclusion, advocacy, breaking down infrastructures, you know, having a voice, knowing your power, all of these awesome things that you shared today. So parting words, we have about 30 seconds or less, like a couple of things you'd like this audience to know, things that they should be focused on and their identities to implement change. If you want to just share a couple of nuggets before we head out today.
30 seconds, huh?
I know, Claudia.
I would say own your voice. Own your worth. People will doubt you based on your identity, based on what they see. They will second guess your abilities to do the work. They'll second guess your ambition. But you have to know your worth. You know, in the past, I would walk into a room and feel like that imposter syndrome pretty strong. But I've grown to accept that I belong there. I do belong there. And just know what you bring to the table. Trust that. And I think that that's confidence. Anything is possible. But we have to also be able to move from possibility to action and really be ready to take on the hard work that needs to be done and translate those dreams that we have into reality. I would say, you know, your success should not depend on where you're from, what you look like, what your limitations may or may not be. So really, self-talk for me has been really valuable, and that has been very grounding for me. Having those quiet conversations with myself regularly, every day, choosing which battle I'm going to fight today, microaggressions, people doubting me, slights. I face these things every day, but it's like, am I going to fight them all? So just constant alignment, keeping in alignment with myself and my true north, and having people in your corner as well, where you can go to them, because you can't do this alone as a woman, especially a woman in multiply marginalized communities. It's tiring. You know, it's tiring. And being intentional about finding that respite, joy, laughter for yourself to replenish your soul. It has to be done, because we can be depleted quickly. It can be a lonely place where we sit. So we have to take care of ourselves at the end of the day, and just to be able to go back into the fight.
Thank you for sharing.
That's beautiful. It's hard to follow that.
I know.
Everything she said.
Thank you, Daisy.
And I will say, everything under the sun has been said and done. But your slant into the world is magical and special. Own it. We tend to hear the voices, and we forget that sometimes you can just acknowledge your insecurities and gaze right past them to move on to what you want to achieve and do, because everything is actually quite possible with the right level of support, with the right level of self-awareness, with the right level of encouragement. I think I always remind my team, you have to embrace change as if change is possible, because it is possible together. I wrote Inclusion Revolution, and I named it the revolution because the real revolution is all of us holding hands and doing this work every single day. Own it, live it, partner, engage, and always remember, and this is part of my mission in life, work can actually be joyful and full of love. We've forgotten that along the way, but it can be full of dignity, respect, joy, and love. Let's find the joy and love back in what we do.
Thank you, ladies. Thanks for joining us today.
Thank you, Lucia, for moderating, and thank you, Claudia and Daisy, for sharing your stories, showing up as your authentic selves, and most importantly, advocating for those underrepresented communities. Let's give these strong ladies a round of applause. So the month of May is Asian American and Pacific Islander Heritage Month. And what better way to recognize the month than to recognize the talented Michelle Zauner, who is the lead singer and guitarist for Japanese Breakfast and New York Times bestselling author of Crying in H Mart. Let's welcome our moderator, Abigail Hollingsworth, VP of Global Employee Benefits, and Trailblazing Women, Michelle Zauner.
Thank you. Michelle, first off, thank you so much for joining us here today.
Thank you for having me.
And also, congratulations on your recent Grammy nominations.
Thank you.
As well, yes, right? As well as your beautiful memoir, Crying in H Mart, which was just published last year and is already being turned into a major film. Is that right?
That's the idea, yeah.
Oh my gosh, that's so exciting. Can you tell us a little bit about your background and how you got here in your journey?
Sure. I grew up in Eugene, Oregon, a small town in the Pacific Northwest. And when I was 16 or so, I just fell in love with the indie rock scene, which I feel like is flourishes in the Pacific Northwest, but is very white male dominated and something that my Korean mother could not understand that I was into. But I started writing songs when I was 16 after I convinced her to let me learn how to play the guitar. And then I attended Bryn Mawr College, where I studied creative writing and played in a band on the side. And actually I created an independent major called creative production that was like film studies and creative writing, which is basically the most like inconvenient or like seems like you're not really going to get a job, but is exactly kind of what I do for a living now. But I studied creative writing in college, and I was so in love with the department and was very fortunate to have a wonderful mentor, Daniel Torday, who was my professor, who exposed me to a lot of my favorite authors and really taught me how to write and to read like thoroughly. And I took every single one of his courses except for nonfiction because I never thought I would write nonfiction, because I felt like, honestly, I just didn't feel like being a Korean American was something that could be literary. I was very into these sort of rugged working class stories like Raymond Carver and Richard Ford. And I wanted to write like that because I felt like if I were to ever write maybe from my perspective, there would have to be too many digressions about my identity and how my parents met. And I could never just have someone that looked like me be a neutral character that was defined by their actions. And the more that I think about it, I realize that I never felt like I could be a main character, an American protagonist.
And yet you are.
And yet this book has very much from my lived experiences and comes from a very authentic part of myself and has been on the bestsellers list for 42 weeks now.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah,
that's
Asian
so
Americans
exciting.
Can absolutely be American protagonists.
Right. And there were so many poignant moments in the book. I loved it when I was reading it. But one of the really interesting parts was when you mentioned Karen Oh, who's the lead singer for the Yeah Yeah Yeahs, and how significant she had an impact in you, being someone who is also half Korean and also doing something that you wanted to do, be a musician. And so I was curious about what you thought about the music industry and what you hope to see change in that, and where you see your role in that change.
Sure. So like I said, I grew up in the Pacific Northwest and was very enchanted by a genre that's pretty white male dominated. And around that time, my friend gave me a DVD of the Yeah Yeah Yeahs live at the Fillmore. And Karen O came bounding from the side of the stage, deep throating a microphone and like lassoing it above her head and spitting water everywhere. And all I could think was, how do I do that? I mean, it was the exact opposite of everything that like a stereotypical, docile, hyper feminine Asian woman was supposed to be. And to find out that she was also half Korean was monumental to me, feeling like I could also make music, that I could also pursue that for a living, that it was possible. So yeah, I mean, I think that it's really wonderful now that, instead of her being the only one, there is such a wonderfully diverse group of Asian American or Asian Canadian women that are in the music scene that are personal friends of mine, and it's really wonderful getting to see that there doesn't have to just be one person to identify. You have all of these different types of music. We all make very different types of music. Yeji is a Korean American electronic DJ, and Luna Lee is a half Korean just shredder, guitar player, violinist, harpist, like multi-talented instrumentalist. Mitsuki writes these like painful, aching, heartbroken songs as a half Japanese woman, and my friend Jae-sam is Filipina and is one of the most incredible producers I know. So it's really exciting to think that you don't have just one person to identify, but you have so many different genres and talents to aspire to.
Well, you also talked about in your book that you wrote about how white boys don't feel that scarcity mentality, right? When they see someone like Iggy Pop on stage. And then you've mentioned so many great artists, and you've been known to really lift up Asian artists through your social media or bringing them on tour. Why is that important for you to do?
I feel like there's two big reasons. I mean, the first was that was how I got my start. I was really lucky that Mitsuki brought me on her first North American tour, and at the time, we didn't really think it was that groundbreaking, but it was me and Mitsuki and Jae-sam, and it was one of the first like North American sold-out shows that featured 3 Asian American women headlining, and it was really powerful. I mean, I don't think that my career would be where it would be without Mitsuki, and at the time, I think Mitsuki could have taken a route where she was in this coveted position as an Asian American woman, and maybe like even in the 90s, like back when they would, and they still do this when they pit women against each other, that there's only space for one of us or whatever. I think that it helps to preemptively bring that in and support other women and support people who make you feel like there's only room for one of you. And so because I really benefited from her sort of supporting me early on in my career, that's something that is really important for me to have, to bring more diversity into the stage. And coming from a DIY background, I know how much it helps to get to open for a headlining band that comes with a guaranteed support payment, and also guarantees that you're going to play to a full room every night. I mean, that is something that I did not have access to until Mitsuki brought me on tour and changed my whole life. And so I feel like I really benefited from that, and I really want to do that for other people in my position.
You're amazing. That's fantastic. And I know that we talked about it actually backstage. You're going to be playing with Karen O soon.
Yeah, that's another wild full circle moment. Yeah, I'm so excited, actually. I've weirdly become somewhat friends with what feels like all of my heroes at this point in time. And she actually hit me up after we got our Grammy nominations, and I think she gave me some funny advice that was just like, if you ever just like want to like smash things, like you should do it. She just is like such a rock star, and like has been so supportive to me privately, and I'm just so excited to get to see her own a stage and play with her. I feel like a little nervous because I feel like I've stolen a lot of show moves from her that I'm gonna have to edit when I open for her. But yeah, it's a real dream come true.
Yeah, but it's so wonderful to hear about the camaraderie and really kind of the community and lifting each other up. That is amazing, because we definitely do need that representation. So thank you. The other piece about your book that I loved was, well, there are so many pieces about your book that I loved, but you also took us on this journey of kind of you finding yourself And it was you finding yourself also told through the story of food, Korean food, which is wonderful. And so I'm curious about how embracing your background and showing up in the world as your authentic self, as an immigrant, as a Korean American woman, as someone who has had some adversity in their life. How has that informed you in what choices you make, especially in your career and your industry, and what work you're prioritizing right now?
Oh, I feel like after my mom passed away, I mean, my life really divided in half. I think of my life very much as before and after that moment. And certainly it lit a fire in me that, our time here is very limited. And I had so much to say and so much I wanted to do and pursue that I think it just changed my life. I think I am extremely ambitious and focused on putting something good out into the world before I leave it. And for me, I think, being biracial and having my parent that ties me to this culture die, this part of myself that I just always felt was just an intrinsic part of me felt at risk in this way. That my mom was no longer alive to ask which brand of seaweed. I felt all of a sudden I couldn't. That's part that I never questioned about myself was no longer just a natural part of who I was. And so I think so much of what the book is about and so much of, me learning to cook Korean food and interacting with the culture more is my way of preserving this part of myself that is at risk if I don't maintain it. It is this type of cultural ritual that I'm working to preserve it. And it also makes me feel closer to my mother, who I miss terribly. And I think that, when I think about what I want to pass down when I have children someday, I think that it's my way of being able to maintain that. So I feel confident in what I have to send down.
I love that, and you almost made me cry. That was so beautiful. One of the things we also talked about in backstage was when I first got this, when they first asked me to actually moderate this, I almost said no. I first was thinking, no, I can't do this. I'm not good enough. I'm not this enough, not this enough. And then they said who it was that I was moderating. And I'm like, you got to break through that because I wanted to meet you, Michelle. But I think that is so common for women, and especially people of color, this whole imposter syndrome, right? And I'm curious at whether or not you've ever experienced this, especially with all of your successes.
I experience it every day. I confront it every moment of my life. Most recently I was asked, I think so much of the time I do, even when we were offered SNL, the first couple days I spent just thinking about how many horrible comments I would receive about how awful my voice was and, people not believing that, I arranged and wrote, most of the material, even though I'm just singing. And so I think you just have to confront it all the time, unfortunately. And in some aspects it gets easier. But I was also asked recently to throw a ball at a Mets game.
You
a couple of weeks. Yeah.
How'd you do?
I haven't done it yet. It's coming up. I'm actually weirdly more nervous about doing that than performing at SNL. So it's I'm going to do exactly what Carly Rae Jepsen did and just throw it into the ground. But then it's so heartbreaking to think about experiences that you're going to miss. I think the thing that's so comforting is knowing that everyone to a certain degree experiences that. I think there's always this feeling that you're going to be found out, that you don't know that much about something, or that you're not really talented, or that you don't really deserve to be there. And I think that's unfortunately probably something that most people go through their entire lives. But in a way, I think it's almost good because it means that you really care and you want to do a good job and you want to challenge yourself. And I certainly have taken on some things that I think have really benefited me because of imposter syndrome. I'm not someone that comes from a really rich music theory background. I didn't study music in college, and that makes me very anxious and full of imposter syndrome a lot of the times that I, have why did I get nominated for a Grammy? Am I a diversity case? All this stuff. And so sometimes imposter syndrome can be kind of a positive thing because it's made me want to take more lessons in music theory, want to take more lessons in piano and guitar and vocal lessons, and it makes me challenge myself and want to be better. So I think sometimes taking that in stride can actually be really helpful. But I think it has so much to do with the way that we're raised a lot of the time as women. I remember, I have a distinct memory of being in this sort of like dingy warehouse practice space, and the freight elevator broke. And my male guitar player just like opened up the like circuit box and started tinkering around. And I was just like, I would never do that. Like for you to have the confidence to do that is astounding, because I grew up, you know, still thinking that I like couldn't drive on the highway because like that's a dangerous thing for women or something, you know, or like a lot of men get like toolboxes when they're children, and we like don't get that, you know, and so I think that there's a lot of things that I've grown up feeling like, oh, that's not for me. I cannot do that because we're so socialized that way from a young age. And so I try to think about that a lot, of just having more confidence in not knowing, and that everyone else is doing the exact same thing.
Well, and I don't know about you, but for me, growing up, being Asian, being Filipino American, I also was taught almost like to the point of perfection. I had to be perfect at everything, or I had to know everything to be able to do something. And so that layered on top of imposter syndrome was just really, really hard. So you mentioned it, but we actually haven't mentioned it yet out loud. What are you doing on Saturday, this coming Saturday?
I will be performing live on SNL's season finale.
Woo!
Thank you.
And you just learned about it 2 days ago. How did you feel?
Yeah, like I said, I mean, I was elated, but also you're immediately just like, oh my God, everyone's going to hate me. Why do I do this to myself? And then you like slowly get over it, I guess.
Is this something of a dream of yours?
I mean, I wouldn't even say that this is a dream of mine, because it's just so out of the realm of fantasy for me. Like I never, I don't even think that I would have imagined that this was something I could aspire to. It was just like beyond the realm of comprehension. So I don't even think I like dreamed of it as a child.
Okay, so what did you do though when you found out?
I was where was I? I was in Des Moines, playing a college show at Grinnell, and we were getting driven in a van, and I just yelled a lot. I don't know what I did. I was like, what am I going to wear?
Oh my gosh. Well, congratulations. That is exciting. So rightfully so, you are being celebrated in so many mediums, across multiple mediums, whether it's the literary world, whether it's the music world, and soon to be, hopefully, the film world. And you make it seem so easy. And so I'm curious about how you juggle so many different kinds, or seemingly different kinds of projects from each other. How do you do it all?
There are two main things. One is I'm really lucky that I've learned to rely on really wonderful, talented people to do the parts of these projects that I am either not great at or not speedy at. So I'm very, very lucky. I'm pretty good at like delegating to a team of people. And for instance, like for my band, things that my band does, or like my managers and stuff like that, it's really wonderful because I used to do so much of that myself. And then the other thing is I just know what it's like to work a 9-to-5 job, and I can never go back there. And so I feel really lucky that I get to do this for a living. Like I feel like I've won the lottery, and I'm working all the time because I'm so excited by the work, and I ultimately, I mean, it maybe seems like the things that I do are quite different from one another, but I think that ultimately I just get to be a storyteller, I love I think my work as an artist is so rooted in just finding what's extraordinary in the mundane. I'm so enchanted by human beings and the way that we interact with each other, and how our experiences shape us, that I just want to shout from the rooftops to look at it and learn from it. And I think that that's sort of what I do as both a musician and as a writer is showcase these types of things and, how they shape us. And I get to share that with the world. It's just constantly invigorating for me. And so I feel, that's sort of how I manage it.
That's beautiful. And I'm sure there are many women, many people who are watching us right now who have multiple passions. What advice would you give them to pursue those many different passions?
I guess to just make a space for it. When I was working a 9-to-5 job, I felt just so unfulfilled, and my whole life, I think also having an Asian mother, like it was always like, you can do these things, but you have to do them on the side. You have to go to college and you can do music on the side. You have to study first and then do this on the side. And so I think in a way, if I had just been born into it and it had always been accessible and easy to me, that I maybe would have taken it for granted and I wouldn't work as hard for it. I wouldn't know that it was so for me in that way. For a long time, after work, I would get home at like 7 and be exhausted. But in order for me to feel fulfilled with my day, I would spend like half an hour or an hour working on some sort of creative project. And then slowly over time, it would turn into an album or an essay or something. And then, it sort of took off from there. So I think that it is possible to make, to set aside just a small amount of time or make very small reserve a small amount of time for you to pursue those interests, while you're juggling everything else in your life.
I love that because that is so tangible. And I think many of us think that we have to actually go big for this. But the fact that you were able to do, though, with these small micro chunks and be able to put out an album and an essay, which the essay was what kickstarted the book. Is that right?
Yeah, I think of so much of what you learn from pursuing a creative field in college is that like you just have to show up. So much of the work is just showing up every day. And so when I started Japanese Breakfast, actually I wrote and recorded songs every day for the month of June, and they were like this 30-track like lo-fi project that was the raw source material for a lot of what I would do later on. But at the time I was like working 3 jobs. I was like very busy, but I think if you just set like a very small goal, like, every day for like 10 or 3 times a week, like for 30 to 30 minutes to 10 to 30 minutes, I'm going to, if you want to write, it's like I'm going to write in that time, or I'm going to paint in that time, or I'm going to take a ceramic class once a week. Like I think that those things are really important to feel a sense of purpose as a human being, and it's also important to explore those parts of who you are and to feel fulfilled. And so I think it's really important to set small goals like that and save that small piece of something for yourself.
Oh my gosh, that's awesome. That means I just have to stop 10 minutes of YouTube to be able to do that. We were talking about how we both watch YouTube, and especially Korean mukbang. What advice do you have for young women who are trying to find their voices? There are so many women out here, out in the world, who are trying to find that voice, but the whole society is actually trying to define us, right? And so I'm curious about what your advice could be on that.
Yeah, I think it's something similar. It took me, like I said, like I never thought I was going to write about my life or my family, and it took this very intense, devastating event in my life to find this sort of natural path there. But it feels sort of serendipitous that was the path in which I found success. It was almost like once I stopped wanting other people to approve of something I was doing so badly and started just writing from the heart, that was when I was rewarded with this creative success. And so, I think that spending, a small amount of time just practicing what that means for you and rereading it, it's hard for me to not think of this in terms of just writing, but I think pursuing whatever path that you're interested in, and exclusively for yourself and not thinking about other people can also take practice. And I think that showing up every day and trying to find what rings true to you and isn't informed by what's popular or what is going to feel like, wholesome or whatever. I think that is essential. And sometimes it just takes, doing something sloppily and loosely to like find that weirdly. For me, it took, I wrote very loosely and very sloppily, and it was a lot of just like word vomit for me to figure out what my voice actually sounded like, I think. Wow. And it just takes time, and I think giving yourself that space and time is what's crucial to finding that. And if you like it, and if you that's something that you're interested in, that's probably your voice.
I love something you just said, which is once you stopped seeking approval, that's when you found success. That is so. My brain stopped there because I'm going to put that down everywhere in my notebook because that is so wonderful. So you've conquered the music world, the literary world, and like I said, the film world soon. What are you working on next, and what are you excited to be working on next?
Yeah, I mean, right now it's just been a lot of touring and like just like reveling in the success of these like 2
Are you
projects.
touring around the world?
Yeah, we're touring around the world this year, which is very exciting. We're going to Asia in the summer and Europe in October and South America in November. So we are booked and busy. So yeah, I'm mostly just trying to enjoy that weirdly right now. And I'm working on the adaptation for the book. I'm working on the screenplay now. And,
You are?
I am, yeah. I finished
my
the first
gosh.
draft and I'm slowly working away at the revision. So that's my main focus. And then I'll probably make another record and another book eventually.
Oh my gosh. So when do you expect the film to come out? Because I can't wait to see it.
I have no idea how the film stuff works, but I think I just have to finish the screenplay first, and then I will probably know more about it. But that world is very new and mysterious to me, so we'll see. Probably not for a few years.
That's a different kind of storytelling, and it's going to be a fun way of seeing your voice out in the screen.
Yeah, absolutely.
So that's exciting. Michelle, there's one more thing I just want to mention, which is, in your book, one of the things that you shared was that your mom asked you to hold back 10%. But I feel like you've given 110% of yourself to all of us. What gave you that courage to do that?
I mean, there's certainly a 10% that I have kept for myself. I have definitely felt like that advice has really helped me protect myself over the years and cherish a part of myself that isn't for everyone. But yeah, I mean, I think honestly, like saving that 10% is like harder for me than it is to share with the world. There's a line in the book where I say, while I struggled to be good, I excelled at being courageous. And I think that's just always how I've felt about myself. I might not be the greatest at all of my tasks, but I am bold.
Yeah.
And I think that I've always felt bold in sharing vulnerability, and I think part of it is an American upbringing where that's something that is pretty valued, I think, and is a bit different from my Asian heritage. So I mean, I think that it's always been the type of art that's compelled me. I've always loved that kind of I've always felt deeply about art that speaks to me in that way, and I think that naturally that was the kind of art I was, I guess, destined to create.
You mean vulnerable?
Yeah.
And transparent.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh, that's amazing. Well, thank you so much. I just wanted to thank you for your time today. You've been amazing. Thank you for all of your successes, your amazing album, and we are all looking forward to seeing your film. And for those who haven't read her book, it is amazing. So Michelle Zauner, thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Thanks, Abby.
Thank you so much.
We have been living through some incredibly challenging times. So creating spaces for conversations, such as the ones we've had today, is especially important. It's also important to recognize and celebrate the trailblazers in our lives. So thank you to our guests, moderators, organizers, those of you watching virtually, and thank you to Deloitte Digital for the partnership in supporting our 4th annual Gender Equality Summit, Trailblazing Women. My name is Olivia Lynch, and it is my honor to serve as the AMER Regional Vice President of our Salesforce Women's Network, our employee resource group dedicated to amplifying the progress of women in every step of our journeys. We aim to increase the representation of women in leadership, create safe spaces where women feel like they belong, celebrate women for who they are, and hold ourselves and our leaders accountable for making changes to benefit our community. Salesforce has prioritized accelerating the representation of women company-wide and at all levels. And through our Black Women Experience, our leadership and mentorship programs, and through supporting our employee-led Salesforce Women's Network, Salesforce has been able to focus on the experiences that women are having. For me, Salesforce Women's Network has helped me grow in my career, truly been a close community of support, and my source of empowerment at work. We hope that all of you are leaving today feeling inspired and empowered to take action for gender equity. We thank you, and we look forward to having you again next year.